The desert stretched, endless in every direction, indifferent to the man who crossed it and the choices that had brought him here. Cole Brennan had been checking his trap line for 3 hours when the sound reached him. A scream raw and guttural, the kind that comes from someone who has been hurting longer than the body should allow. He found her in a dry wash between red rock formations that jutted from the earth like broken teeth. An Apache woman lay sprawled on her side, one leg twisted at an angle that made his stomach clench. The bear trap's serrated jaws had buried themselves in her calf, just below the knee, and blood had darkened the sand in a spreading pool that spoke of hours, not minutes. But when she saw him approach, she did not beg. Her hand moved toward the knife at her belt with the deliberate slowness of someone conserving strength for one final act of violence. That should have told Cole everything about what was coming. Saving her life was going to cost him something he had not planned to give. His horse had caught the scent, first ears swiveling forward with the nervous attention animals gave to blood. Cole had dismounted without thinking, moving through the canyon on instinct carved deep by 3 years of solitude. The territory was disputed ground claimed by settlers and Apache alike, which meant most people avoided it entirely. That was exactly why Cole preferred it. Fewer questions, fewer faces that might recognize the name Brennan and remember what had happened back in Silverton. The woman was huge, broader across the shoulders than most men Cole had known, and easily 6 feet tall even lying down. Her traditional clothing, leather and beadwork worn smooth with use, marked her as Apache, and the bone necklace at her throat suggested someone of standing within the tribe. Black hair matted with dust and sweat fell across her face, but her eyes tracked his movements with the focused intensity of a wounded mountain lion deciding whether to flee or fight. The trap itself was anchored to a heavy chain, bolted into a boulder half buried in the wash. Cole knelt beside it, studying the mechanism with the careful attention his father had taught him before the old man died and everything in the family had turned to ash and accusations. The metal was new, well-oiled, designed to hold without killing immediately. Someone had set this with purpose and planning. They were catching people, not animals. The woman's breathing came shallow and controlled, each inhale measured against the pain radiating through her body. Her hand remained on the knife knuckles, white with the effort of maintaining her grip. She spoke in Apache, the words sharp and warning syllables Cole did not understand, but whose meaning was absolutely clear. Touch me and die. Cole met her gaze and held it, letting her see his face clearly, letting her make whatever judgment she needed to make. Then he reached for the trap anyway. She could stab him if she wanted. If he did not get the steel jaws open soon, infection would accomplish what the metal had started. The release mechanism was stiff-crusted with blood that had dried dark and flaking in the heat. Cole worked it carefully, aware of every movement his hands made, every shift of his weight. The woman watched with an intensity that made the skin between his shoulder blades prickle, anticipating the knife blade that might come any second. When the jaws finally ground open with a wet scraping sound that echoed off the canyon walls, she gasped. It was the first real sign of vulnerability she had shown, and it lasted less than a heartbeat before her face set again into hard lines of endurance. Blood flowed freely from wounds that went deeper than Cole had hoped. He pulled the bandana from around his neck, wrapping it tight around her calf with quick efficiency, born from years of ranch work and the kinds of injuries that came with it. She let him do it without protest, which surprised him more than anything that had happened so far. Her eyes were starting to lose focus, her body finally surrendering to trauma it had fought for hours. Cole needed to move her, needed clean water and shelter and time. 3 things this territory offered reluctantly and at high cost. He lifted her onto his horse with more effort than he expected. She was solid weight, all muscle and bone, and her head lolled against his chest as consciousness slipped in and out like tide. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped, and Cole knew he was racing against fever and infection and the men who had set that trap. Because whoever put it there might still be watching. The nearest water source was a spring tucked into a canyon wall about 3 miles west, barely more than seepage but clean enough to drink and hidden well enough that most travelers missed it. Cole kept the horse to a walk, scanning ridgelines for the glint of metal or the unnatural stillness that meant human eyes were watching from cover. The woman drifted between alertness and unconsciousness, sometimes murmuring words he could not parse, sometimes going rigid with pain when the horse's gait jostled her damaged leg. The sun had passed its peak when they reached the spring shadows beginning their slow stretch across the canyon floor. Cole dismounted carefully, easing her down and propping her against the rock wall where the overhang provided shade. Her eyes opened briefly, unfocused and glassy with fever, already beginning to take hold. He worked quickly, building a small fire with dried mesquite heating water in his battered tin cup. The wounds needed cleaning before infection rooted too deep to fight. When he unwrapped the makeshift bandage, the damage looked worse than it had at first glance. The trap's teeth had torn through muscle, and white bone showed beneath shredded flesh that wept clear fluid mixed with blood. She came fully awake when he poured hot water over the wounds, her hands shooting out to grip his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes locked onto his, wide and fierce despite the pain, and she spoke words that sounded like warning, or curse, or both. Cole did not pull away. He met her gaze and kept working, washing away dirt and dried blood, inspecting for fragments of rust or fabric that would poison the wounds from within. She held his wrist through it all, fingers tight enough to bruise, breathing through gritted teeth. The sun was dropping toward the horizon when Cole finally finished wrapping her leg with strips torn from his spare shirt. She had passed out again, her breathing shallow but steady, her face slack with exhaustion that went beyond the physical. Cole sat back against the rock wall, feeling the weight of the day settle into his bones like accumulated years. That was when he noticed the tracks, fresh prints in the soft sand near the spring, clear as signatures. Boot prints, not moccasins. 3 different sets, maybe 4, all leading east toward the direction he had come from. They had been here recently, within hours. Whoever had set that trap knew about this spring. They knew the routes. They were hunting with method and patience. Cole looked at the unconscious woman, then back at the tracks. The smart thing would be to leave her with water and what little food he carried, then ride away before whoever made those prints came back. The smart thing would be to disappear into the territory and let someone else deal with whatever trouble she represented. He was still trying to convince himself to do the smart thing when he heard horses approaching from the east. Multiple horses moving at a gallop, riders who were not trying to be quiet, which meant they were either confident or desperate. Cole moved fast, dragging the woman deeper into the overhang's shadow, covering her with his bedroll and kicking sand over the blood-stained ground near the spring. He scattered the fire, positioned himself at the canyon's narrow entrance with his rifle, and waited. If they were looking for her, they would have to go through him first. 4 riders appeared at the canyon mouth, their horses lathered and blowing hard from sustained running. They were white men, rough-looking in the way that spoke of hard living and harder choices. The kind who made their money on the wrong side of territorial law and did not lose sleep over it. The lead rider was thick-bodied, with a face mapped in scars, and he carried a rifle across his saddle with the casual ease of someone who used it often. His smile showed gaps where teeth should have been, and his eyes held the flat affect of a man who had stopped caring about consequences years ago. The scarred man's voice came rough as sand over stone. "Saw your tracks. Thought we'd check who's using our water." Cole kept his rifle low but ready, thumb resting near the hammer. "Didn't see any claim markers. Don't need markers out here, just need to know who belongs and who don't." The man's eyes moved past Cole, scanning the overhang with the methodical attention of someone trained to read landscapes for what they hid. His gaze lingered on shadows, on disturbed sand, on the places where someone might conceal something worth concealing. "You alone." "That's right. Funny, track said 2 horses came in, only see 1 now." Cole did not respond. The lie hung between them, obvious and dangerous as a drawn blade. One of the other riders, younger with a wispy mustache that did not hide his youth, shifted in his saddle and pointed toward the overhang. "There's blood on them rocks." The scarred man's smile widened gaps in his teeth, making it a predator's expression. "You wouldn't happen to have found something of ours, would you, big Apache woman? Probably hurt bad. We've been tracking her since yesterday. She stepped right into our trap just like we planned." So there it was, laid bare. These men were not random trappers or territorial drifters. They had been hunting her specifically, had set that trap with her in mind, had tracked her for a day and a half, waiting for the steel jaws to do their work. The question was why. Apache women did not have bounties on them. Killing them brought more trouble than profit, unless this was not about money at all. Cole's jaw tightened. "Haven't seen anyone." The scarred man spat into the dirt, the gesture contemptuous. "You're a poor liar, friend. We can track as good as any Apache, and those prints lead right to where you're standing." He glanced at his companions, some silent signal passing between them. that Cole recognized from his years as a ranch hand when his brother was still alive, and their father's spread had employed men who settled disagreements with violence instead of words. Now we can do this easy or hard. Easy as you step aside, let us collect what's ours. Hard as we take her anyway, and you don't walk out of this canyon. Cole's thumb found the hammer of his rifle. 4 against 1 were not odds he liked, but the canyon was narrow enough that they could not spread out. They would have to come at him in a line single file through the entrance, and the first man through would die. The second probably would too. The question was whether Cole could reload fast enough for the third. Before he could decide, a sound echoed down the canyon that made all 5 men freeze in their saddles. It was distant but unmistakable. Hoofbeats, dozens of them moving at a gallop, drumming against hard ground with the thunder of a summer storm rolling across open plains. Mixed with the sound of horses came voices calling out in Apache, too many to count, spreading across the territory in what sounded like a search pattern. The scarred man's face went pale beneath the weathering and scars. He jerked his horse around, nearly colliding with the rider behind him. "Move!" They scattered like spooked cattle, whipping their horses back the way they had come. Within seconds, they were gone, leaving only dust and the fading sound of panicked hoofbeats. Cole turned slowly, looking toward the source of the approaching thunder. The Apache voices were getting closer, spreading out in what he now recognized as a coordinated sweep, warriors calling to each other across the distance, tightening a net. Behind him, beneath the bedroll, the woman stirred and spoke for the first time in hours. Her voice was weak but clear, the English accented but precise. "They come for me, and now they find you." The Apache warriors appeared on the canyon rim like shadows materializing from stone, so silent and sudden that Cole's heart kicked hard against his ribs. 15, maybe 20 of them, all mounted and armed with rifles and bows and lances. They did not charge down immediately. They simply spread out along the high ground, surrounding the entire canyon with the patience of men who knew their prey had nowhere to run. Cole kept his rifle ready, but did not raise it. Shooting now would be suicide, and more importantly, it would guarantee they would never let him explain. The woman Dakota, he would learn her name, was later struggled to sit up behind him, pushing the bedroll aside. She called out something in Apache, her voice stronger than it had been an hour ago, and several of the warriors shifted in their saddles. One rider moved forward, guiding his horse down the steep canyon wall with the practiced ease of someone who had been born in the saddle. He was massive, broader across the shoulders than any man Cole had ever seen, wearing traditional Apache clothing and a war chief's headdress that marked him as someone of significant authority. His face was weathered and hard eyes like flint chips as they fixed on Cole with an intensity that made every instinct scream or run. The chief reached the canyon floor and dismounted, moving toward them with the coiled readiness of someone who had killed more men than he could remember and felt no burden from it. Dakota spoke quickly, gesturing toward Cole, toward her bandaged leg, explaining something that made the chief's expression shift from fury to something more complicated. He knelt beside his daughter, that much was clear, from the way he touched her gentleness in those massive hands as they examined the makeshift bandages, and spoke to her in Apache, the words too rapid for Cole to catch even if he had understood the language. Then he stood and turned to face Cole fully for the first time. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear, the words chosen with care. "You saved my daughter." The word hit Cole like a physical blow. Daughter. He had pulled the chief's daughter out of a trap, treated her wounds, spent hours alone with her. In any culture that carried weight. In Apache culture, Cole had no idea what it meant, but the chief's expression suggested it was significant. Cole's throat felt dry. Found her in a trap, didn't know who she was, just knew she needed help. The men who set trap, you see them, 4 of them came through here, left when they heard you coming. The chief's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath weathered skin. He barked orders in Apache to the warriors on the rim. Several of them immediately wheeled their horses and disappeared, presumably to track the men who had escaped. When the chief turned back to Cole, his expression had shifted again, this time to something that looked almost like respect. It made Cole more nervous than the anger had. "I am Mongus. This is Dakota, my eldest daughter." He paused, studying Cole with those flint-hard eyes in a way that felt like being weighed and measured against standards Cole did not understand. "You could have left her, could have taken what you want and gone. Why you stay?" Cole glanced at Dakota, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. The honest answer was that he did not entirely know. The smart answer was that he had been planning to leave when the rider showed up, but something in Mongus's gaze demanded truth, not strategy. Didn't seem right to leave her. Mongus nodded slowly as if this answer confirmed something he had already suspected. Then he said something that made Cole's stomach drop. You touch my daughter. You save her life. You stay with her when warriors come. The chief's voice was measured formal, as if reciting something important. By our law, by our tradition, you have claimed her, and she has claimed you. Cole's mouth went dry, words sticking in his throat. I didn't claim anything. I just helped her. Does not matter what you mean, matters what you do. Mongus's expression hardened, the respect vanishing behind something inflexible as stone. You are outsider. You do not know our ways, but now you must learn them. He gestured toward Dakota, who had gone very still, her face carefully neutral. Tomorrow when sun is high, you will marry my daughter. This is not request, this is law. The canyon suddenly felt smaller walls pressing in. Cole looked at Dakota, searching for some sign that this was a misunderstanding, that the chief was testing him, but her face revealed nothing. And if I refuse, Mongus's smile was cold, then you dishonor her, dishonor me, dishonor my people, and we do not let dishonor walk away. They rode to the Apache village in formation that made Cole's position absolutely clear. He was not a prisoner exactly, but he was not free either. Warriors flanked him on all sides, and Dakota rode beside him on a horse. Her father had brought her injured leg carefully positioned to avoid pressure. She had not spoken since they left the canyon, and Cole had not pushed. What was there to say? The village appeared in a wide valley protected by steep red cliffs on three sides, a natural fortress that would be hell to assault and easy to defend. Wickiups made from branches and hide dotted the landscape, smoke rising from cooking fires. Women stopped their work to watch the procession, and children ran alongside the horses until their mothers called them back with sharp words. Everyone knew something significant was happening. Cole could feel their eyes on him, measuring, judging, trying to understand what this outsider represented and whether he was threat or curiosity. They brought him to a larger wickiup near the center of the village. Mongus dismounted and gestured for Cole to follow. Inside, the space was surprisingly cool, thick walls keeping out the afternoon heat. Woven mats covered the ground, and weapons hung from support poles, lances, bows, a rifle that looked newer than anything else in the structure. Sit. Cole sat. Mongus poured water from a clay vessel, offering it to Cole first before drinking himself. It was a gesture of respect, Cole realized, though what he had done to earn it remained unclear. The chief settled across from him, close enough that Cole could see the scars on his knuckles, the way his hands had been broken and healed wrong more than once, the evidence of a life spent in violence. You want to know why men hunt my daughter? It was not a question. Crossed my mind. Dakota is warrior, best warrior in tribe. She scout our territory, watch for dangers. Mongus's expression darkened, something old and cold moving behind his eyes. 3 weeks ago, she find men building structures on our land, not homes, pens, places to keep people. He paused, letting that sink in, watching Cole's face for reaction. Slave traders. They take Apache, take anyone they can catch, sell them south of the border, to mines, to ranches, to men who want workers that cannot run away. Cole's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors of such operations, whispers that circulated among drifters and territorial loners, but they were supposed to be farther south, deeper into lawless country. If they were setting up this far north, it meant they were getting bolder, more organized, confident that no one would or could stop them. Dakota destroy their pens, free the people they already catch. They very angry. Mongus's smile was grim, carrying a satisfaction that Cole understood on a level deeper than words. So they set trap, not for animals, for her. They learn her routes, where she ride, where she scout. They wait. And if I hadn't found her, they would have come back, taken her, sold her, or worse. Mongus met his eyes, the weight of unspoken understanding passing between them. You save her from fate worse than bear trap. This is why you marry her. Not punishment. Honor. The word hung in the air, complex and heavy. Honor. As if marriage to a woman he had known for less than a day was somehow honorable, as if he had any real choice in the matter. What if she doesn't want this? Mongus stood, pulling back the entrance flap. Afternoon light spilled in bright and harsh. You ask her yourself, she waits outside, you talk, learn each other. Tomorrow you marry, but today you decide if you run or stay. He left, and after a moment that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, Dakota entered. She moved carefully, favoring her injured leg, but refusing to show weakness. In the dimmer light of the wickiup, Cole could see her face more clearly. High cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that missed nothing. She was not beautiful in any conventional sense. She was striking, powerful, completely at ease in her own skin despite the injury and the situation. She sat across from him, close enough that he could smell sage smoke clinging to her clothing and the copper scent of blood that still lingered from her wounds. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things neither knew how to articulate. Finally, she broke it. You could run tonight. My father would track you, but you could try. Her voice was lower than he expected, steady despite everything. Would he catch me? Yes. No hesitation, absolute certainty. But he would respect the attempt. Cole studied her face, looking for some hint of what she wanted, what she thought about this entire situation. Do you want me to run? Dakota's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, something complex that might have been hope or fear or both. What I want does not matter. Law is law. It matters to me. That got a reaction. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since he had found her in that trap, she looked genuinely surprised. She studied him with new intensity, as if seeing him for the first time, as if his words had rearranged something in the way she understood the world. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, carrying something that sounded like vulnerability, carefully controlled. Those men, the ones who trapped me, they still out there. They still hunt my people. She paused, her gaze holding his with uncomfortable directness. You marry me, you make alliance with my tribe. You become part of something bigger than yourself. Or you run. Stay alone, stay safe. Her next words came slower, as if she was working out what she thought while speaking it. What kind of man are you? The question landed with unexpected force. Cole looked away, out through the wickiup entrance, where the village continued its evening routines, where people moved with purpose and belonging, where everyone fit into patterns he did not understand. He thought about Silverton, about the ranch that had burned, about his younger brother Ethan, always angry, always drinking, always looking for someone to blame for their father's death and the debts that had piled up after. About the night Ethan had come at him with a knife, drunk and furious about something Cole could not even remember now. About how the lamp had fallen during the struggle, about how fast the dry wood had caught, about how Ethan's screams had sounded eerily similar to the scream that had led Cole to Dakota today. About the family who blamed Cole for not saving his brother, for starting the fire, for being the one who walked out alive. About Rebecca, his fiancée, who had looked at him after the funeral, with eyes that said she believed every accusation, believed he was a killer who had let his own brother burn. About 3 years of running, of checking trap lines in disputed territory, of avoiding towns and faces and questions, of convincing himself that solitude was the same as peace. Dakota was not asking him to run. She was asking him to stay, to matter to people who had no reason to trust him, but were willing to trem on. I don't know what kind of man I am anymore. The honesty surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. But I know I'm tired of running. Something in Dakota's posture relaxed, fractionally tension he had not realized she was carrying, releasing by degrees. Then maybe you stay. Find out what kind of man you are when you stop running. She rose to leave, moving with that careful grace despite her injury, and paused at the entrance. My father is hard man, but he is fair. If you stay, if you marry me, he will expect you to be warrior, to fight for tribe, to protect people you do not know. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable in the shadows. If you can do this, maybe marriage is not so bad. Maybe we both find something we did not know we were looking for. Then she was gone, leaving Cole alone with his thoughts and the impossible choice that was not really a choice at all. Cole did not sleep that night. He sat outside the wickiup they had given him, watching stars wheel overhead, in patterns that had guided travelers for centuries, thinking about all the ways his life had gone sideways in a single day. He could run. His horse was tied near the eastern edge of the village, and the guards Mangas had posted were visible, which meant they were meant to be visible, which meant there were others he could not see. But Cole had slipped past better men before, back when he was younger and stupider and thought running solved problems instead of just postponing them. Dakota's question kept echoing in his head. What kind of man are you? He had been running for 3 years, ever since the ranch burned and Ethan died and the family blamed him for both. He had run from the guilt, from the accusations from Rebecca, who had been promised to him before she saw what he had done, and understood that the man she thought she loved was capable of violence, even if that violence had been in self-defense. He had run until running became easier than staying anywhere long enough to care about the people around him. Dakota was not asking him to run. She was asking him to stay, to be part of something, to matter. And the terrifying thing was that some part of him, some part he thought had died with Ethan, wanted to say yes. When dawn broke, Cole walked to Mongus's wickiup and found the chief already awake, sharpening a knife with methodical strokes that spoke of ritual and meditation. Mongus looked up, studied Cole's face for a long moment, and nodded once, as if Cole had already spoken the words aloud. You stay. I stay. Good. Then we prepare. Mongus stood, sheathing the knife in one smooth motion. Ceremony is at midday. Before then, you learn what it means to marry a Apache woman. The next few hours passed in a blur of information Cole tried to absorb but knew he was missing half of. Mongus explained the ceremony's significance, how it bound not just two people, but two families, two ways of life, how the tribe was not just accepting him, but adopting him with all the responsibilities that came with such acceptance. The chief gave Cole traditional clothing to wear, leather leggings, and a shirt decorated with beadwork that had belonged to Mongus's father, an honor Cole understood even if he did not fully grasp its weight. Dakota appeared mid-morning, accompanied by older women who had prepared her for the ceremony. Someone had braided her long black hair and woven small feathers into it. She wore a dress of soft doeskin decorated with intricate patterns that must have taken months to create. Despite the bandage still visible on her calf, she moved with grace and dignity that made Cole's chest tighten with something he could not name. When her eyes met his across the village center, something passed between them. Recognition of shared uncertainty, maybe, or the beginning of something neither had words for yet. She approached him slowly, aware of the dozens of eyes watching, aware that this moment mattered in ways that went beyond the two of them. You look different. Her voice was quiet enough that only he could hear. Cole glanced down at the Apache clothing, still feeling awkward and exposed in it. So do you. A hint of a smile touched her lips, brief but genuine. Scared, terrified. This time she did smile, and it transformed her face from striking to something that made his breath catch. Good, me too. The admission surprised him. She had seemed so composed, so certain, so completely in control. But now, standing close enough that he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands kept adjusting the dress, she clearly was not comfortable wearing. He realized she was as far outside her comfort zone as he was. Can I ask you something? Yes. When you asked what kind of man I am, what kind were you hoping for? Dakota was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face with an intensity that felt like being read in a language he did not speak. One who stays, one who fights, one who sees me as partner, not possession. She paused, her voice dropping even lower. One who chooses to be here, not forced. Cole met her gaze, seeing vulnerability behind the warrior's mask for the first time. I'm choosing. Why? It was a fair question, deserved an honest answer. Because I'm tired of running. Because what you said about being part of something bigger, I used to have that. Lost it. Maybe this is a chance to find it again. He held her eyes, letting her see the truth in his. And because you deserve better than to die in that trap alone. Dakota's expression softened in ways he had not seen before. She reached out her hand, hovering near his for a moment, before she let it drop back to her side. Then we find it together. A horn sounded across the village, low and resonant, calling the tribe to gather. Mongus appeared at the wickiup entrance, his face solemn with the weight of what was about to happen. It is time. The entire tribe gathered in the village center, forming a wide circle around the ceremonial space. Warriors stood at attention with lances planted in the ground, their faces painted for the occasion. Women held children who were too young to understand, but old enough to sense the importance of what was happening. Even the Dayo seemed to know this was significant, lying quiet at the edges of the crowd. Mongus stood at the circle's center, wearing his full war chief regalia, the feathered headdress, bone breastplate, ceremonial paint that marked him as leader. He raised one hand and the murmuring crowd fell silent. When he spoke, his voice carried across the village with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. He began in Apache, the words rhythmic and formal, explaining to his people what was happening and why. Cole caught fragments words that sounded like honor, like debt, like alliance. When Mongus switched to English, it was clearly for Cole's benefit, making sure he understood what he was agreeing to, making sure there would be no misunderstanding about the commitment being made. Dakota, daughter of Mongus, warrior of our people, Cole Brennan, outsider who saved her life. You stand before tribe, before ancestors, before the land itself. He gestured for them to step forward. Cole moved on legs that felt disconnected from conscious control. Dakota stepped forward with more confidence, though he could see the slight tremor in her hands. Dakota, you accept this man as husband, as protector, as partner in all things. Her voice was steady, carrying across the circle. I accept. Mongus turned to Cole, his flint eyes boring into him with weight that felt physical. Cole Brennan, you accept this woman as wife, as warrior, as partner in all things. You accept her people as your people, her enemies as your enemies, her honor as your honor. The weight of those words settled over Cole like physical pressure. This was not just marriage. It was adoption into the tribe, complete and binding. The slave traders who had hunted Dakota would now hunt him. The tribe's wars would be his wars. There was no halfway, no partial commitment, no escape clause written into tradition that stretched back centuries. He looked at Dakota standing proud despite her injured leg and thought about her question. What kind of man are you? I accept. Mongus nodded, then gestured for Cole to kneel. When he did, Dakota extended her hand and he took it. Her palm was calloused from years of riding and fighting, warm and solid in his grip, real in a way that cut through the surreal quality of everything else. Mongus placed his own massive hands over both of theirs, the weight of them carrying the authority of leadership and tradition in something older than either. Then by our law you are bound. What the tribe witnesses no man can break. The crowd erupted in calls and whoops, warriors striking their lances against the ground in rhythm that echoed off the surrounding cliffs. But the celebration was cut short by a sound that made every warrior reach for weapons. A gunshot distant but clear from the eastern ridge. Then another, and another. Mongus's expression went cold. He barked orders in Apache, and warriors scattered with the organized efficiency of men who had drilled for exactly this scenario. Some ran for horses, others took defensive positions around the village. Still others moved to protect the women and children who were already retreating toward the sheltered wickiups at the valley's most protected point. In seconds, the celebration had transformed into organized chaos. The slave traders. Dakota's hand tightened around Cole's, her voice carrying certainty and something that might have been fear, carefully controlled. They come now, during ceremony, when they think we are distracted. A young warrior ran up to Mongus, speaking rapidly in Apache, with the urgent cadence of bad news delivered fast. Mongus's face darkened, muscle jumping in his jaw. He turned to Cole, and the respect that had been growing in his eyes was now tempered with something harder. They attack from three sides, try to draw us out, divide our forces. His eyes were chips of flint. You just become part of this tribe. Now you prove it. He thrust a lance into Cole's hands, the weapon heavy and unfamiliar, the balance all wrong compared to anything Cole had ever held. He had never used a lance before, had barely held one, except for the few minutes during the ceremony when Mongus had shown him the proper grip. But as Dakota moved to his side, grabbing her own bow, despite her injury, he understood what was being asked. This was not a test. It was survival. The kind where you either figured things out fast or died learning. Can you ride? Dakota's voice was tight, focused, all the softness from earlier replaced by something harder and more necessary. Yes. Can you fight? Cole thought about his brother, about the fire, about 3 years of running from violence and consequences. Then he looked at the warriors preparing to defend their families, at Dakota's determined face at the village that had just accepted him as one of their own. I'm about to find out. Dakota's smile was fierce, carrying something that might have been approval, or might have been the grim satisfaction of someone who had made the right gamble. Good. Then we fight together. They ran for the horses as another volley of gunshots echoed across the valley, and Cole realized that marrying into this tribe meant more than ceremony and tradition. It meant standing between the people he had just sworn to protect and the men who wanted to destroy them. And he had about 5 minutes to figure out how to use a lance before those men arrived. The slave traders came hard and fast, 12 riders, spreading out across the eastern approach, their firing rifles as they charged. They were counting on chaos, on panic, on the tribe being unprepared during ceremony. What they got instead was disciplined warriors who had been fighting longer than most of these men had been alive. Cole swung onto his horse, the lance awkward in his grip, trying to remember the basic stance Mongus had demonstrated earlier. Hold it here, balance the weight, use the horse's momentum, not your own strength. The instructions felt theoretical as bullets kicked up dirt around him. Dakota rode beside him, her horse straining to match pace despite her injured leg. She handled her mount like it was part of her body bow already drawn, releasing arrows with deadly precision that made Cole's amateur attempts with the lance look pathetic by comparison. Two riders fell before they got within 100 yards of the village, and the remaining attackers scattered looking for cover in the rocky terrain. That was when Mongus made his move. He had positioned warriors on both flanks, hidden in the draws and gullies that marked the valley's edges. When the slave traders broke formation, searching for protection from the arrows that kept finding them, the Apache warriors emerged like ghosts, cutting off retreat and driving the attackers toward the center, where Cole and a dozen other mounted fighters waited. The scarred man from the canyon was among them. Cole recognized him immediately, saw the moment recognition flashed across that damaged face. The man wheeled his horse toward Cole, specifically raising his rifle with the deliberate aim of someone who wanted this kill to be personal. Cole did the only thing desperation allowed. He threw the lance. He had never thrown a lance before, did not know proper technique or correct angle, or how to compensate for wind and distance. But desperation made up for skill, and the weapon flew true enough to catch the scarred man's horse in the chest. The animal went down hard, screaming, throwing its rider into rocks that made wet cracking sounds on impact. The man's rifle discharged into the air, the shot going wild. Before he could recover, before he could reach for the pistol at his belt, 3 Apache warriors were on him with knives and clubs, and the kind of violence that came from defending home and family. Cole's stomach lurched at the brutality, but there was no time to process it. Another rider was charging him, pistol drawn, and Cole had lost his lance in the throw that had saved his life. He drew his own pistol, the familiar weight of it steadying his hands as muscle memory from years of target practice took over. He fired twice. The first shot missed. The second caught the rider in the shoulder, spinning him in the saddle but not stopping him. The man returned fire, and Cole felt something hot tear across his ribs, a line of fire that made his breath catch but did not unseat him. Dakota was there suddenly, her horse slamming into the wounded rider's mount, both animals squealing as they collided. Her knife flashed once, twice, and the man toppled from his saddle, clutching his throat as blood poured between his fingers. She looked at Cole, her eyes fierce and bright with the adrenaline of combat. "You throw like child, but you alive. This is good start." The fight lasted less than 15 minutes, though it felt like hours compressed into desperate seconds. The slave traders outnumbered and outmaneuvered by warriors who knew this terrain like they knew their own hands tried to surrender. Mongus did not give them the chance. These men had set traps for his people, had planned to sell them like livestock. There would be no mercy, no prisoners who might escape and return with reinforcements. This was tribal justice, older and harder than anything territorial courts recognized, and it was absolute. When the dust settled, 12 bodies lay scattered across the valley floor. Not a single Apache had fallen, though several bore wounds that would need tending. Cole dismounted on legs that shook, the adrenaline draining out of him and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Dakota approached, moving carefully on her injured leg. She pulled his lance from the dead horse's chest, blood darkening the sand around it, and handed the weapon back to him with an expression he could not read. "You throw like someone who has never held lance before." Her voice carried something that might have been criticism or might have been grudging respect. "I haven't." Cole's hands were shaking, the pistol still gripping tight enough that his knuckles had gone white. He forced himself to holster it. Didn't have much choice. Dakota studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly as if confirming something she had suspected. "This is what it means to be part of tribe. You do what must be done even when you do not know how." She touched his arm briefly, the contact lasting only a heartbeat, but feeling more intimate than anything that had happened during the ceremony. You stay, you fight. You prove my father right to demand this marriage." Cole looked at the bodies, at the blood soaking into thirsty ground, at the warriors already stripping weapons and supplies from the dead. His ribs burned where the bullet had grazed him, and his hands would not stop shaking, no matter how hard he tried to steady them. "Is that what you wanted, for me to prove something?" "No." Dakota's voice softened in a way he had not heard before. "I want partner who chooses to stay even when it is hard. You could have run last night, could have refused in ceremony, could have hidden when fighting started." She met his eyes, and he saw vulnerability there, carefully controlled, but present. "But you stay. This is what I want." Mangas approached, blood on his hands, in satisfaction on his weathered face. He looked at Cole with something approaching approval, though his expression remained hard. "You fight poorly, throw like child." The chief's massive hand came down on Cole's shoulder, grip firm enough to make the point. "But you stand where other men run. This makes you worthy husband for my daughter." He glanced at the dead horse with Cole's lance still protruding from it, then back at Cole's face. "Tomorrow we train you properly. Today we burn the dead and tend the wounded." The scarred man was not dead. Cole discovered this when warriors dragged him to the village center, his leg twisted at an angle that made Cole's stomach clench, his face a mask of blood and dirt and barely suppressed agony. They dropped him in front of Mangas like an offering, and the chief regarded him with the flat affect of someone deciding whether something was worth the effort of killing. Mangas spoke in Apache questions, delivered in a tone that suggested answering was the only path to a quick death. The scarred man spat blood, said something defiant that made several warriors move forward with raised weapons. Dakota stepped between them and her father, speaking rapidly in their language, gesturing toward the prisoner and then toward the eastern ridge where the attack had originated. Mangas listened, his expression unchanging, then nodded once. He turned to Cole, switching to English with the deliberate care of someone making sure there would be no misunderstanding. "My daughter says we should question this one before we kill him. She thinks he knows things that matter. I think he is dog who deserves to die like dog." Mangas paused, studying Cole's face. "But you are part of tribe now. You have voice. What do you say?" The question landed with unexpected weight. Cole looked at the scarred man, at the hate burning in his eyes despite the pain, at the word he kept glancing toward the eastern ridge, as if expecting rescue that would not come. "If he knows something about the slavery trading operation, about who's running it and where they're based, that's worth knowing. Dead men can't tell you anything useful." Mangas's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. Respect, maybe? Or recognition that Cole was thinking tactically rather than emotionally. "Good answer. We question him, then we kill him." They dragged the scarred man into Mangas's wickiup, away from the eyes of the tribe. Cole followed Dakota at his side, both of them moving with the careful deliberation of people whose bodies were starting to register the damage they had sustained during the fight. Inside, they bound the man to one of the support poles, his broken leg extended at an angle that made him gasp every time he moved. Mangas stood over him, arms crossed, waiting with the patience of stone for the man to stop writhing and pay attention. When the prisoner finally looked up, eyes watering from pain, Mangas spoke in English, so Cole and the captive could both understand. "You attack my village. You hunt my daughter. You try to steal my people." The chief's voice was flat, empty of emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying than anger would have been. "Tell me who pays you. Tell me where your camp is. Tell me how many more like you are coming. You do this, I kill you quick. You refuse, I let my warriors take their time." The scarred man laughed, the sound wet and broken. "You think I'm scared of dying? I've been dead inside for years, old man. Ever since the war ended and men like me stopped mattering." His eyes found Cole, recognition sparking despite the pain. "I know you. Saw you at that spring protecting this bitch like she was something precious." He spat blood toward Dakota, the gesture contemptuous. "She killed my brother when she destroyed those pens. Stabbed him in the back while he was trying to stop her from freeing the merchandise. So yeah, I set that trap special for her. Wanted to watch her bleed slow." Dakota's expression did not change, but Cole saw her hand move to the knife at her belt, fingers wrapping around the handle with the kind of grip that had suggested she was calculating whether Mangas would stop her from using it. The scarred man kept talking, words spilling out like poison finding release. You want to know who's paying? Dutch Van Bergen runs the whole operation from a fortress about 60 miles south of here. Ex-cavalry officer knows these territories better than you savages ever will. He's got 40 men, maybe 50, all veterans who know how to fight. His smile was ugly gaps where teeth should be making it almost a skull's grin. And he don't take kindly to people interfering with his business. Your girl cost him near $20,000 when she freed those captives. He's going to come for her personal, and when he does, all the warriors in this valley won't be enough to stop him. Mongus absorbed this information without visible reaction, but Cole saw the way the chief's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping beneath weathered skin. 60 miles south, fortress, 40 men. Mongus repeated the details as if committing them to memory. Where exactly? The scarred man's smile widened despite the pain that must have been excruciating. Dead Horse Canyon, built into the rock walls where you can't see it from above. Only two ways in both guarded day and night. You'd need 100 warriors to take it, and you'd lose half of them trying. He laughed again, the sound deteriorating into coughing that sprayed blood. So go ahead and kill me. Won't change nothing. Dutch already knows where your village is. He's just waiting for the right time to hit you when you're distracted by some ceremony maybe, or when your warriors are out hunting. His eyes found Cole again. And you stupid bastard. You just married into a war you can't win. Should have run when you had the chance. Mongus nodded to the warriors flanking the entrance. They moved forward, dragging the still-talking prisoner outside. His voice carried through the wiki-up walls, defiant to the end, until it cut off abruptly in a way that needed no explanation. The silence that followed felt heavy, weighted with implications that were sinking in by degrees. Mongus turned to face Cole and Dakota, his expression harder than Cole had yet seen it. This changes things. If Dutch Van Bergen has 40 men and knows where we are, we cannot stay here. Village is too exposed, too easy to attack. He looked at his daughter, something complex passing between them. And if he is coming for you specifically, we must decide how to face this threat. Running will not work. He will track us. Fighting here gives us advantage of terrain, but risks whole tribe. Dakota's voice was steady despite the weight of her father's words. Then we go to him first. Take the fight to his fortress before he brings it here. Force him to defend instead of attack. Mongus shook his head, the gesture carrying finality. 40 warriors against 50 in a fortress built into rock. That is not tactics. That is suicide. Cole had been listening, mind working through possibilities, drawing on memories of his father teaching him about siege warfare and defensive positions during long winters when stories were all they had for entertainment. What if you didn't attack the fortress directly? What if you made him come out to defend something else? Both Dakota and Mongus turned to look at him, waiting for elaboration. He's running a slave trading operation. That means he needs captives to sell, and he needs buyers to sell them to. If you disrupt his supply lines, hit the buyers, make his operation unprofitable. He either has to abandon the fortress to protect his interests, or he loses everything without a fight. Mongus studied Cole with renewed interest, the tactical assessment clear in his eyes. You think like warrior, but this takes time, and we do not have time if he is planning attack. Then we buy time, send scouts to watch his fortress, track his movements, see when he leaves and where he goes. Use that information to stay ahead of him. Cole was warming to the strategy, now seeing possibilities branch out from the central problem. And while we're buying time, we find his buyers, his supply routes, the places where he's vulnerable. No fortress is impenetrable if the people inside it are starving, or broke, or fighting among themselves. Dakota was nodding, her expression shifting from concern to calculation. This could work, but it requires patience, and trust that our scouts will see Dutch before he sees them. She looked at Cole with something new in her eyes, something that might have been respect, or might have been the beginning of actual partnership. You think different than Apache warriors. This is not a bad thing. Different can be useful. Mongus grunted, the sound non-committal but not dismissive. We will discuss this with War Council, but first we tend wounded and prepare defenses in case Dutch comes sooner than we think. He gestured toward the wiki-up entrance. Both of you are injured. Go to healer, let her work. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we plan. Cole followed Dakota out into afternoon light that felt too bright after the wiki-up's dimness. His ribs burned where the bullet had grazed him, and exhaustion was settling into his bones with the weight of accumulated years. Around them, the village was returning to normal rhythms, women resuming cooking, children playing as if death had not visited their home just an hour ago. The healer was an ancient woman whose face was mapped in wrinkles so deep they looked carved rather than earned. She worked on Cole's ribs with hands that were surprisingly gentle, cleaning the wound with water that smelled of sage and herbs he did not recognize. The pain was immediate and intense, but underneath it came cooling relief that suggested whatever she was using actually worked. Dakota sat nearby, allowing the old woman to check her leg wound, unwrapping the bandages Cole had applied yesterday to examine how the flesh was healing. The healer spoke in Apache tone disapproving, and Dakota responded with what sounded like defensiveness. The old woman clucked her tongue, shaking her head, and applied fresh packing to the injuries before rewrapping them with strips of clean cloth. She gestured for Dakota to stay off the leg as much as possible, then turned her attention back to Cole. She spoke in Apache, the words directed at Dakota rather than Cole, and whatever she said made Dakota's cheeks darken in a way that suggested embarrassment. The healer laughed, the sound crackling like dried leaves, and patted Cole's shoulder with unexpected warmth before shuffling away to tend other wounded warriors. What did she say? Cole's curiosity overrode his usual reluctance to pry. Dakota's expression was carefully neutral. She says you are brave but stupid like most men, and that I should make sure you do not die doing something foolish before you give her grandchildren to spoil. The last part hung in the air between them, implications clear and uncomfortable. They were married now by tribal law and custom, which meant certain expectations came with that status. But they were still strangers, still figuring out what this arrangement meant beyond political alliance and mutual survival. Cole's ribs chose that moment to send a sharp spike of pain through his side, making him gasp. Dakota moved to steady him without hesitation, her hand on his arm supporting weight despite her own injured leg. Come, we go to our wiki-up. You need rest. The phrase our wiki-up landed with strange weight. Cole had not thought about the practical implications of marriage, about sharing living space, about the intimacy that came from occupying the same small structure day and night. He had been too focused on survival and fighting and not dying to consider what came after. The wiki-up they had been given was larger than the temporary shelter from last night, positioned near the village center, in a way that suggested honor or possibly surveillance or both. Inside, someone had laid out sleeping mats and blankets, had left water, and food had prepared the space for newlyweds in ways that made Cole's stomach tight with awareness. Dakota entered ahead of him, moving carefully to the far side where she lowered herself onto one of the mats with visible relief. She gestured for Cole to sit, and when he did, she surprised him by reaching out to touch the bandage covering his ribs. Does it hurt? Her voice was quieter than it had been since the ceremony, carrying concern that she had not allowed herself to show in front of the tribe. Some, I've had worse. It was not entirely true, but it felt like the kind of thing you were supposed to say. Dakota's fingers lingered on the bandage for a moment before she pulled her hand back. That was first time you killed someone. I could see it in your face during fight. The shock. Cole did not know how to respond to that observation, the accuracy of it, cutting through any deflection he might have tried. I shot a man. Don't know if he died from it. He died. I saw him fall when we were leaving battlefield. She studied his face with uncomfortable directness. It will bother you for a while. Then it will bother you less. Then one day you realize it stopped bothering you at all, and that bothers you more than the killing did. The matter-of-fact way she spoke about taking life unsettled Cole more than the violence itself had. This was her normal, the world she had grown up in, where combat and death were facts as basic as weather and seasons. How old were you the first time, Dakota looked away, her gaze distant. 14. Raiding party attacked while hunters were gone. Man tried to take my younger sister. I used my father's knife. She paused, fingers unconsciously moving to the blade at her own belt. He died slowly. Took almost an hour. I sat with him the whole time because my mother said that was what warriors did. They did not let enemies die alone, even enemies who deserved loneliness. Cole tried to imagine being 14 and sitting with someone you had killed, watching them die, and could not bridge the gap between that experience and anything in his own history. Your sister, is she here? Something shifted in Dakota's expression, pain flickering across her features before she controlled it. She was taken by slave traders 6 months ago, before I knew what they were doing before I found their pens. My father sent warriors to track her, but trail went cold near Mexican border. Her voice remained steady, but Cole heard the edge underneath it, the carefully contained rage and grief. This is why I destroyed their pens, why I free their captives. I cannot save my sister, but maybe I save someone else's sister. The revelation recontextualized everything Cole had learned about her since finding her in that trap. She was not just a warrior defending her tribe. She was someone fighting a personal war against an enemy who had taken what mattered most, driven by guilt and hope in equal measure. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but Dakota nodded as if they carried the weight he had intended. My father blames himself. Says he should have protected Village better, should have known traitors were in territory. He blames me too for not being there when attack came. I was scouting looking for game. She met Cole's eyes and he saw the same guilt he carried about Ethan reflected in her face. So when he says you must marry me, part of him is trying to protect me in a way he could not protect my sister. And part of me wants to refuse because I do not want to be protected like helpless thing. I am warrior. I protect myself. Cole understood that conflict better than she probably realized. The need for independence warring with the desire for connection, the fear that accepting help meant admitting weakness, the complicated pride that could strangle relationships before they began. For what it's worth, you don't seem helpless to me. You seem dangerous. Dakota's expression shifted something that might have been surprise or might have been pleasure. Dangerous how? Dangerous like someone who destroys slave pens single-handed. Dangerous like someone who kept fighting with a trap tearing through her leg. Dangerous like someone who can put an arrow through a man's throat from horseback while injured. Cole held her gaze, letting her see he meant every word. I don't want to protect you from things you can handle yourself. But I also don't want to leave you alone in fights where having another person matters. That's not about you being weak. That's about tactics. Dakota studied him for a long moment, something complex moving behind her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than before. This is good answer. Better than I expected. She shifted position on the mat, grimacing as her injured leg protested the movement. I was worried you would be like other men who think wife means property, who think marriage gives them right to control. Is that why you asked what kind of man I was? You were checking if I'd try to own you. Yes, no hesitation, absolute honesty. Many men see strong woman and want to break her, make her smaller so they can feel bigger. My mother warned me about this when I became warrior. She said some men cannot love woman who is not beneath them. Cole thought about Rebecca, his fiancée, back in Silverton, who had expected him to take over his father's ranch and settle into comfortable mediocrity, who had looked at him with something like disappointment when he talked about maybe trying something different, maybe traveling, maybe seeing if there was more to life than repeating his father's mistakes. I think people who need others to be small probably feel pretty small themselves. Dakota's smile was brief but genuine. This is also good answer. She lay back on the mat, exhaustion finally winning over the need to maintain composure. Her eyes closed, and for the first time since Cole had found her in that trap, she looked vulnerable in a way that went beyond physical injury. I'm very tired. Battle takes much from me. Cole stretched out on his own mat, careful of his ribs, feeling the accumulated weight of the day pressing down like physical force. Outside, the village continued its rhythms, voices rising and falling, children laughing, dogs barking. Normal sounds that felt alien after the violence that had preceded them. Dakota. Yes. Thank you for not letting that man shoot me when you knocked his horse into mine. She opened one eye, looking at him across the space between their mats. You are my husband now. Part of my job is to keep you alive, so tribe does not waste ceremony. But her tone suggested something different, something more personal than duty. Also, you throw Lance badly, but you stand when I need you to stand. This matters more than skill. Cole felt something shift in his chest, some small knot of tension loosening. I'll try to get better at the lance throwing. Good, because next time you might not be lucky. She closed her eye again, her breathing already evening out towards sleep. And Cole? Yeah. I'm glad you stayed. The words were barely more than a whisper of vulnerability wrapped in admission. Cole watched her face relax into sleep, watched the hard lines soften, and realized that staying might have been the first genuinely good decision he had made in 3 years. Cole woke to darkness and the sound of voices outside the wickiup, urgent and low. For a moment, he could not remember where he was, his hand reaching instinctively for the pistol he usually kept beside his bedroll. Then memory reassembled itself, the ceremony, the battle, Dakota sleeping across from him in the space they now shared. She was already awake, her hand on her knife body tensed for whatever threat the voices represented. The flap opened, admitting Mongus and two other warriors Cole did not recognize. The chief's face was grim in the firelight that filtered through from outside. There is problem. We found scouts watching village from ridge. They run when my warriors find them, but message is clear. Dutch knows where we are and he is watching. Mongas gestured for them to follow him outside. Cole rose carefully, his ribs protesting the movement, and stepped into cool night air that carried smoke and sage. A small group had gathered near the council fire, older men, women whose bearings suggested authority, warriors whose faces Cole had seen during the battle. Mongas spoke in Apache, first explaining something that made several people respond with visible anger or concern. Then he switched to English clearly for Cole's benefit. Scouts reported seeing at least 20 men on ridge to east. They did not attack, just watched. This means Dutch is planning something big, waiting for right moment. He wants to know our numbers, our defenses, how we respond to threats. An older warrior, his face heavily scarred, spoke in Apache with the tone of someone who had earned the right to disagree with his chief. Mongas listened, expression unchanging, then responded with equal force. Back and forth they went, the debate clearly heated, even if Cole could not understand the words. Dakota leaned close, her voice low enough that only Cole could hear. Blackhawk says we should abandon village tonight, move deeper into mountains where Dutch cannot find us. My father says running makes us weak, encourages more attacks. Blackhawk says protecting tribe is not weakness. She paused, watching the exchange with the focused intensity of someone deeply invested in the outcome. They are both right. This is problem. The debate continued for several minutes before Mongus raised his hand, silencing everyone with the gesture. He spoke in English again, his gaze moving between tribal members and settling on Cole. We cannot decide this alone. Cole Brennan is part of tribe now. He has voice in council. What does he say? Every face turned toward Cole, dozens of eyes weighing and measuring, waiting to see if the outsider who had married into the tribe could offer anything useful, or if he would prove that Mongus had made a mistake. Cole's throat felt dry, but he forced himself to speak clearly. Blackhawk is right that protecting the tribe matters most. But Mongus is also right that running now might encourage attacks later. Dutch has 40 or 50 men. If he decides to hunt you through the mountains, he can keep you running forever, picking off stragglers, waiting for you to weaken. He paused, organizing thoughts that were still forming. But there's a third option. You don't run and you don't stay. You split into smaller groups, move to different locations, make it harder for Dutch to target everyone at once. Some groups head into mountains and some stay in valley, but move to more defensible positions. Some go to allied tribes and build larger coalition. Cole saw Mongus's eyes narrow, the chief processing this suggestion. This way, if Dutch attacks one group, the others survive and can respond. And if he tries to attack all groups, he has to divide his forces, which makes him weaker. It's not ideal, but it might be better than the other options. The silence that followed felt heavy. Then Blackhawk spoke again, this time nodding slowly as if considering Cole's words. Other voices joined in debating in Apache, the tone shifting from hostile disagreement to active problem-solving. Mongus let the discussion continue for several minutes before raising his hand again. We will vote. Those who want to abandon village completely, show hands. 3 hands went up, including Blackhawk's. Those who want to stay and fight here. 5 hands. Those who want to split into groups, as Cole suggests. The remaining hands rose, a clear majority, including Mongus's own. The chief nodded, decision made. Then we prepare. Tomorrow we divide tribes, send groups to different locations. We keep scouts watching Dutch's fortress, track his movements. And we find his weaknesses while he thinks he is hunting us. He looked at Cole with something approaching approval. You think like warrior and like planner. This is rare combination. You will help lead one of the groups. The weight of that responsibility settled over Cole like a physical thing. He had been married for less than a day, had been part of this tribe for hours, and now he was being asked to help lead people whose language he did not speak and whose customs he barely understood. Dakota's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers wrapping around his with firm pressure. I will go with him. We lead together. Manga studied them both, then nodded. Good. Husband and wife should not be separated so soon after ceremony. You will take 20 people into Canyon to the west, establish camp at Spring, where water is good. Black Hawk will take group north into mountains. I will stay here with main group. Make Dutch think we have not changed anything. The meeting broke up, people dispersing to their wiki-ups to prepare for departure. Cole and Dakota walked back to their own shelter in silence, the weight of what had just been decided settling over them like inevitable weather. Inside, Dakota sat on her mat and looked at him with an expression that was hard to read in the dim light from the fire outside. You surprised me tonight. Most outsiders would stay quiet in council, afraid to offend. You spoke like you belong. Cole lowered himself onto his own mat, careful of his ribs. Didn't feel like I belonged. Felt like I was guessing and hoping not to say something stupid. You did not say something stupid. You said something useful. My father respects this more than he respects many warriors who have fought beside him for years. She shifted position, grimacing as her leg protested. But now we must lead 20 people, keep them safe while Dutch hunts us. This is a hard thing for two people who are still learning each other. Cole heard the concern beneath her words, the same doubts he was feeling about whether he was capable of what Mongus had just asked. We'll figure it out. You know the territory and the people. I know tactics and defensive strategy. Between us, maybe we're one functional leader. Dakota's smile was brief but genuine. This is optimistic thinking. I like this. She lay back on her mat, her face turned toward him across the small distance between them. Yeah. When we are alone, you can call me Coda. This is what my sister called me before she was taken. I have not let anyone use this name since then, but I think maybe I want you to use it. The intimacy of that offer landed with unexpected weight. Cole understood instinctively that this was trust being extended, something private being shared. Thank you, Coda. Her smile widened fractionally. You are welcome. Now sleep. Tomorrow will be a hard day and we both need strength. Cole closed his eyes at exhaustion, pulling him down despite the thoughts that circled like vultures. Somewhere outside, guards maintained watch, protecting the village against threats that would come eventually, no matter how careful they were. Inside this small wiki-up, he and Dakota lay separately, but together, two people learning to be partners in a world that gave them no room for mistakes. Morning came too early, announced by voices and movement throughout the village. Cole woke to find Coda already up, checking her weapons with the methodical attention of someone who had learned that preparation prevented death. She looked over when he stirred, her face composed but carrying a tension he was learning to recognize. My father wants to speak with us before we leave. He is at council fire. They found Manga surrounded by maps drawn in sand, crude but effective representations of territory and travel routes. He looked up as they approached, his expression serious. I have thought more about your plan to disrupt Dutch's operation. It is good strategy, but it requires information we do not have. He gestured to the sand maps. We know where his fortress is. We know he has 40 or 50 men, but we do not know his supply routes, where he gets food and weapons, who his buyers are. Without this, we cannot hurt him meaningfully. Cole knelt beside the maps, studying the marks that indicated water sources and defensible positions. The man you captured yesterday said Dutch is ex-cavalry. That means he thinks like military, which means supply lines and logistics matter to him. If we can find where he's getting supplies, we can intercept them, or at least watch who comes and goes. Mongus nodded slowly. This is good thinking, but it requires scouts who can get close to fortress without being seen. And it requires patience while Dutch may be preparing to attack. How long can you hold him off if he comes here? The chief's expression darkened. With preparation, maybe 3 days. Without preparation, maybe 1. He has rifles and numbers. We have terrain and knowledge. It will be close fight, and many will deep even if we win. Coda spoke up, her voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who had thought through all possibilities. Then we move faster than planned. Leave today instead of tomorrow. Put distance between tribe and village before Dutch commits to attack. If he finds empty village, he must waste time tracking where we went. Mongus considered this, then nodded. Yes, we move today. Cole, you and Dakota take your group now before sun is high. Blackhawk will leave at sunset. I will keep scouts watching Dutch's fortress, send word if he moves. He stood his massive frame seeming even larger in the morning light. Be careful, both of you. Dutch is dangerous, but so are the territories. Water is scarce, game is scarce, and there are other tribes who may not understand that you are allied with us. He looked at Cole directly, his eyes holding weight. You are outsider who becomes insider very fast. Some in tribe respect this. Others think it is wrong. Be aware that not everyone who follows you will be happy to follow you. The warning landed with uncomfortable clarity. Cole had been so focused on external threats that he had not considered internal politics, the warriors who might resent taking orders from someone who had been part of the tribe for less than 2 days. I understand. Good, now go, gather your group. Time is enemy now. They spent the next 2 hours organizing 20 people for departure. Coda knew everyone by name, knew their skills and weaknesses, knew which warriors could be trusted and which needed watching. She moved through the preparations with efficient authority that made clear she had done this before, had led groups through difficult territory, and brought them back alive. Cole stayed close, learning names, watching how she gave orders in ways that sounded like suggestions, how she listened to concerns without letting them derail momentum. This was leadership earned through respect rather than demanded through position, and it was more effective than anything Cole had seen from officers during the war. Their group consisted of 10 warriors, 6 women, 3 children, and 1 elder, who insisted on coming despite being old enough that travel would be difficult. Coda tried to convince the old man to stay with Mongus's group, but he refused with the stubborn certainty of someone who had outlived too many people to fear death. I go with young people. Maybe I teach them something before I die. His name was Chaska, and his face was mapped in wrinkles so deep they looked carved. But his eyes were sharp, and when he looked at Cole, there was assessment rather than judgment. You are outsider who marries Dakota. This is strange thing, but Mongus is wise man. If he trusts you, he will trust you and until you prove me wrong. They left before noon, moving west toward the canyon where Cole had first found water. The journey would take most of the day, even without injured members slowing them down. Coda set a measured pace that accounted for the children and Chaska's age, posting scouts ahead and behind to watch for pursuit. Cole rode beside her, hyper-aware of the responsibility settling over him, like weight he could not shrug off. These people were trusting him with their lives based entirely on Mongus's judgment and Coda's acceptance. If he made wrong decisions, people would die, and their deaths would be on his conscience alongside Ethan's. You are thinking too much. Coda's voice cut through his spiral of worry. I can see it in your face. You worry about leading, about making mistakes, about whether people will follow you. Cole did not deny it, could not deny it when she was reading him so clearly. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. Good. Leaders who think they know everything are dangerous. Leaders who know they do not know everything learn fast and ask for help. She gestured toward the group strung out behind them. These people do not expect you to be perfect. They expect you to try hard and listen when they speak. You do both these things already. A shout from the rear scout interrupted whatever Cole might have said in response. The warrior was pointing back toward the village, towards something moving fast across open ground. Dust cloud big enough to suggest multiple riders heading away from the village, but angling in a direction that might intercept their route. Coda raised her hand and the group stopped immediately, everyone looking to her for direction. She squinted at the dust, calculating distance and speed. Could be our scouts. Could be Dutch's men. We cannot know until they are closer. She turned to one of the warriors, a young man named Tahatan, who Cole had seen fight well during the battle. Take 3 others right ahead to high ground. See who comes. If enemy, return fast. If friend, signal us. Tahatan nodded and selected his companions without hesitation. They broke away from the group, horses moving at a gallop toward the ridge that would give them elevation and visibility. The waiting was worse than movement. Cole watched the dust cloud, watched the ridge where Tahatan and his scouts were climbing, felt time stretch in ways that made seconds feel like minutes. Beside him, Coda sat her horse with apparent calm, but Cole could see the tension in her shoulders the way her hand rested on her bow. Finally, Tahatian appeared on the ridge waving his arms in a pattern that Coda immediately recognized. She relaxed fractionally, though her expression remained serious. Friendly, but coming fast, which means urgent message. The riders resolved into Apache warriors, 5 of them pushing their horses hard. They pulled up in front of Coda and Cole breathing hard, speaking in rapid Apache that Cole could not follow. But Coda's face went pale, her jaw tightening in ways that made Cole's stomach drop. She turned to him, her voice carefully controlled. Dutch is moving. Scouts report his entire force left the fortress 3 hours ago, heading toward the village. They will arrive before sunset. The implications hit Cole like physical force. Mangas was still at the village, with maybe 30 warriors, preparing to hold against an enemy that outnumbered him nearly 2 to 1. The chief had said he could hold for 3 days with preparation, but they had moved up the timeline, which meant less preparation, which meant worse odds. We have to go back. Cole spoke without thinking, instinct overriding strategy. If we go back, we can help even the numbers. Coda shook her head, her expression pained. If we go back, we abandon our group, leave women and children in Chaska exposed, and we arrive too late to help prepare defenses, which means we die for nothing. She was right, and Cole hated that she was right. Tactical sense said stay with their group, trust Mangas to handle his own defense, focus on keeping the people they were responsible for safe. But every instinct screamed to turn around to help, to not abandon the man who had accepted him into the tribe. One of the scouts spoke again, pointing back toward the village, his voice urgent. Coda listened, then translated for Cole. He says Dutch's force is moving slow, careful, not charging in. This means they are being cautious, which means they respect our strength. My father can use this. Make them think we are stronger than we are. She paused, working through possibilities. If we continue to canyon establish camp, we can send most warriors back to help defend village. Small group stays with women and children. This way, both groups have protection. Cole saw the logic, but also saw the problem. That splits our fighting force when we might need everyone together. What if Dutch has scouts watching all the groups? What if this is a feint to draw warriors away from the women and children? Then we are careful. Post guards, stay alert. Coda's voice carried finality, decision made. My father taught me that protecting the weak matters more than glory in battle. We take our group to safety, then we send help. This is how we serve tribe. She turned to address the group in Apache, explaining the situation, making the decision clear. Cole saw acceptance on most faces, resignation on others, but no one argued. They trusted her judgment in ways they probably did not yet trust his. They moved faster now, urgency replacing caution, pushing toward the canyon with the knowledge that time was enemy. Cole's ribs protested the pace, sending sharp spikes of pain with each jarring step the horse took, but he ignored it. Compared to what Mangas was probably facing, his discomfort was nothing. The canyon appeared in late afternoon light shadows already stretching across the valley floor. Coda directed people to defensible positions, posting guards, organizing the camp, with efficiency that suggested she had done this many times before. Within an hour, they had established a perimeter and confirmed the springs still provided clean water. Coda called the warriors together, speaking in Apache with Cole standing beside her. When she finished, 5 of the 10 warriors mounted their horses, checking weapons with the grim attention of people preparing for combat. Tahatian was among them, his young face set in determined lines. Before they left, Tahatian approached Cole, speaking in careful English. You fight well yesterday, for outsider who does not know Lance. It might have been insult or compliment, or both. Cole decided to take it as the latter. I'm learning. Yes, you learn fast or you die. Tahatian's smile was brief. I think maybe you learn fast. We see if I am right. Then they were gone, 5 warriors riding hard toward a battle they might not survive, leaving Cole and Coda with 15 people to protect, an uncertainty that pressed down like physical weight. The waiting was worse than fighting. Cole stood watch on the canyon rim as darkness fell, scanning the eastern horizon for signs of smoke or fire that might indicate the village under siege. Behind him, the camp had settled into uneasy, quiet children, finally asleep after asking questions their mothers could not answer. Warriors taking shifts on guard duty with the tense vigilance of people expecting attack from any direction. Coda joined him after checking the perimeter one final time, her movement still careful on the injured leg, but showing improvement from yesterday's trauma. She said nothing at first, just stood beside him, looking toward the place where her father was probably fighting for his life and the lives of everyone who had stayed behind. They will survive. My father is best warrior I know. He has fought worse odds. Her voice carried conviction that Cole suspected was more hope than certainty. Dutch has 50 men and rifles. Your father has maybe 30 warriors, and not all of them have guns. Cole kept his gaze on the horizon, searching for something he knew he would not see at this distance. The math isn't good. Math is not everything, but anything. Apache warriors know terrain, know how to make enemy waste ammunition, know how to fight at night when white men cannot see. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. But you are right, the math is not good. They stood in silence for several minutes, the only sounds coming from the camp below and the desert around them. Somewhere a coyote called the howl lonely and distant. Cole's ribs ached where the bullet had grazed him, a persistent reminder that violence could find you even when you were trying to avoid it. Tell me about your brother. Coda's words landed without warning, cutting through his thoughts. Cole stiffened, his first instinct to deflect, to change the subject, to maintain the walls he had built around that particular piece of his past. But something in her tone suggested this was not idle curiosity, and after everything they had been through in 2 days, deflection felt dishonest. What do you want to know? The truth. I see guilt in your face when you think no one is watching. Same guilt I carry about my sister. I want to understand what makes you run for 3 years. Cole's throat felt tight, words catching on memories he had spent those 3 years trying to bury. His name was Ethan. Younger than me by 4 years, which meant I was supposed to look out for him, supposed to keep him from making stupid choices. He paused, organizing thoughts that had lived chaotically in his head for so long. Our father died when I was 22, left us a ranch that was barely profitable and debts that were substantial. I wanted to sell it, use the money to pay off what we owed, and start fresh somewhere else. Ethan wanted to keep it, said we owed it to our father's memory to make the ranch work. Coda listened without interrupting, her presence steady in the darkness. We fought about it for months. Every conversation turned into an argument. Ethan started drinking, said I was betraying the family, said I was a coward who wanted to run away from hard work. Maybe he was right about that. I don't know anymore. Cole's hands tightened on the rifle he was holding, knuckles going white. One night he came home drunk, found me packing my things. I decided to leave, let him keep the ranch, figure it out on his own. He came at me with a knife, said if I walked away, I was dead to the family anyway, so he might as well make it real. The memory rose with visceral clarity despite the years that had passed. The smell of whiskey on Ethan's breath, the wild look in his eyes, the way the lamplight had caught on the blade as he swung it toward Cole's throat. I grabbed his wrist, tried to hold him off. We struggled. The lamp fell. Oil spread across dry wood faster than I could process what was happening. Cole's voice had gone flat, stripped of emotion through repetition of these facts to himself in the dark hours when sleep would not come. I could have pulled him out. The fire hadn't spread everywhere yet. But he was still coming at me with the knife, still trying to kill me, and I hesitated. By the time I made the decision to save him anyway, the smoke was too thick, the heat too intense. I barely made it out myself. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications that Cole had lived with for 3 years and still did not know how to carry. His body was found near the door. Maybe he was trying to get out. Maybe he passed out from smoke. The family said I murdered him, said I started the fire deliberately, said I let him die because he was in my way. Cole finally looked at Coda, meeting her eyes in the dim starlight. I don't know if they're right. I know I didn't start the fire deliberately, but I also know I hesitated when I should have acted, chose my own survival over his because he was trying to kill me, and some part of me thought that made it okay. Coda absorbed this without visible judgment, her expression thoughtful rather than shocked or disgusted. Your brother attacked you with knife. You defended yourself. Fire was accident born from this defense. Where is murder in this? He was drunk, out of his mind. If I'd been stronger, faster, better, I could have disarmed him without the lamp falling. And if he had been sober, smarter, better brother, he would not have attacked you with knife. Coda's voice carried steel beneath the sympathy. You carry guilt for things you could not control. This is waste of strength that could be used for things you can control. Cole wanted to argue to explain all the ways she was oversimplifying, but part of him recognized the truth in her assessment. He had been carrying Ethan's death like penance for 3 years, accepting blame that others had assigned him because it felt easier than fighting their narrative or examining his own choices clearly. Your family blamed you because blaming is easier than accepting that sometimes people make choices that lead to their own death. Your brother chose to drink, chose to attack you, chose to value ranch over your life. His choices killed him, not yours. She moved closer, her hand finding his arm in the darkness. I know this because I do same thing with my sister. I blame myself for not being there when traitors came, as if I could have predicted attack, as if my presence would have changed outcome. But truth is she was taken because traitors are evil men who take what they want, not because I failed to protect her. Her grip tightened. We both carry guilt for things that are not our fault. Maybe this is why Mongus demanded you marry me. He sees in you what I see in me. Someone who runs from guilt instead of facing it. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Cole had spent 3 years running from Silverton, from his family's accusations, from Rebecca's disappointed eyes, from the cemetery where Ethan was buried. Running had become easier than staying, isolation more comfortable than connection, distance more manageable than intimacy. But standing here on this canyon rim with Coda's hand on his arm and 15 people depending on him to keep them safe running was no longer an option. The guilt might never fully release its grip, but maybe Coda was right that it did not have to control every choice he made going forward. Thank you. The words felt inadequate but necessary. For what? For not looking at me like I'm a murderer. Coda's laugh was brief and bitter. I have killed 8 men in my life. All deserved it, but dead is dead. If you are a murderer, then so am I, and so is every warrior who defends their people. Maybe we are all murderers. Maybe this word means nothing in a world where violence is necessary for survival. She released his arm, turning her attention back to the eastern horizon where darkness had swallowed any evidence of battle. Tomorrow we will know what happened at Village. Tonight we do what we can do here. Keep our people safe, maintain watch, prepare for possibility that Dutch sent men to hunt other groups. Well, the tactical shift felt like relief, moving from emotional territory that was exhausting to navigate back to concrete problems with concrete solutions. Cole settled into the watch rotation, his body protesting the lack of sleep, but his mind too active to rest even if he tried. Chaska appeared sometime after midnight, the old man moving with surprising quiet for someone his age. He lowered himself to sit beside Cole with joints that cracked audibly, and for several minutes said nothing at all. Finally, he spoke in heavily accented English. You watch for danger. This is good. But you also watch for something else. Forgiveness, maybe. Or permission to forgive yourself. Cole glanced at the elder, wondering how much Coda had told him, or how much he had simply observed. I heard you tell Dakota about brother. Sound carries at night when old men cannot sleep. Chaska's weathered face was barely visible in the starlight, but his eyes caught what little illumination existed. I am old man. I have seen much death, much guilt, much people who carry weight that is not theirs to carry. You want to know what I think? Cole found himself nodding despite not having asked the question. I think your brother chose his path when he decided knife was answer to disagreement. You chose yours when you decided staying alive mattered more than dying to make him feel justified. Both choices are equally valid. Only difference is you are alive to feel guilty, and he is dead to feel nothing. The old man pulled a pipe from somewhere in his clothing, packed it with tobacco, lit it with a coal from the small fire one of the guards maintained. Apache have saying, the dead cannot be changed, but the living can choose what to carry forward. You carry your brother's death like stone around neck. This weighs you down, makes you slow, makes you think you deserve punishment. He puffed on the pipe smoke curling into the night air. But maybe guilt is not punishment. Maybe guilt is just unfinished business. You never got to tell your brother that you did not want him dead, only wanted him to stop trying to kill you. This leaves wound that cannot heal because other person is gone. Chaska looked at Cole directly, his gaze carrying weight of years and experience. So you tell him now, out loud, to the stars, to the desert, to whatever gods you believe in. You say what needs saying. then you let it go, not because you have earned forgiveness, but because carrying it forever serves no one. The simplicity of the suggestion felt almost insulting, as if 3 years of guilt could be resolved by talking to empty air. But something in Chaska's tone suggested this was not dismissal of Cole's pain, but recognition of how to process it in ways that allowed forward movement. What if I can't let it go? Then you carry it until you can, but you stop letting it make your decisions. You stop running because running is easier than facing what you did or did not do. You stand, you fight, you protect people who need protecting. You become man who chooses life over death, action over paralysis, partnership over isolation. Chaska stood with effort, joints protesting. You are married to Dakota now. This means you have responsibility to be present, not lost in past. She deserves partner who is here, not ghost who wishes he was somewhere else. He shuffled away before Cole could respond, leaving smoke and wisdom and uncomfortable truths hanging in the air. Cole sat alone for another hour, wrestling with Chaska's words, with Coda's earlier assessment, with the accumulated weight of 3 years spent avoiding exactly the kind of reckoning they were both suggesting. Finally feeling foolish but desperate, he spoke into the darkness in a voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, I didn't want you dead. I wanted you to stop. I wanted us to figure it out without violence. I'm sorry the lamp fell. I'm sorry I hesitated. I'm sorry you died. The words felt inadequate, insufficient, too small to contain everything that needed saying. But Chaska was right that speaking them out loud changed. Something shifted, some internal weight fractionally created space for possibility that had not existed before. I'm going to stop running now. Not because I've earned it, but because running doesn't work. I'm going to try to be present, try to protect people who need it, try to be the kind of man you thought I wasn't when you came at me with that knife. He paused, aware of how insane this would sound if anyone was listening. I hope wherever you are, you found peace. I hope you understand I didn't want it to end that way. And I hope you'd forgive me if you could. The desert offered no response, no sign that his words had been heard or mattered. But Cole felt something ease fractionally in his chest, some knot of tension loosening enough that breathing felt less effortful than it had for 3 years. Dawn came with a rider approaching fast from the east, his horse lathered and blowing hard from sustained running. Cole was still on watch, had never left the rim, despite exhaustion pressing down like physical force. He shouted alert, and within seconds, warriors had surrounded the newcomer with weapons drawn. But it was Tahatan, one of the 5 who had ridden to help defend the village. His face was drawn with exhaustion and something else that might have been grief or might have been shell shock from combat that had gone on too long. Coda reached him first, speaking in rapid Apache, her face going through a series of expressions Cole was learning to read. Relief, concern, anger, more relief. She turned to translate for Cole even as more people gathered to hear news. Village still stands. My father lives. But we lost 6 warriors and Dutch's men burned half the wickyups before they retreated. Tahatan says the battle lasted through the night, that Dutch finally pulled back when he realized we would not break easily. Her voice carried something complicated beneath the relief. But this is not victory. This is postponement. Dutch left scouts watching village, waiting for weakness. My father is wounded, not seriously, but enough that he cannot fight at full strength. And Dutch's men took captives when they retreated. 3 women and a child who were trying to flee the burning structures. The news hit Cole like cold water. Mongus had held the village, but at a cost that would ripple through the tribe. 6 warriors dead meant 6 families grieving, meant defensive capability, reduced by nearly 20%, meant Dutch had proven he could inflict serious casualties even in defeat, and the captives. 3 women and a child now in Dutch's hands, which meant leverage, meant Dutch could demand ransoms or use them as bait, or simply add them to whatever inventory of human misery he was maintaining at his fortress. Tahatan spoke again, his voice hoarse from smoke and shouting. Coda listened, her expression darkening further. He says Dutch's men were not trying to take the village. They were trying to draw warriors out, kill as many as possible, weaken us for future attacks. They succeeded. Even though we held the village, we are weaker now than before. She looked at Cole and he saw the same tactical assessment he was making. Dutch can afford to lose men. We cannot. Every warrior who dies is warrior we cannot replace easily. Dutch just recruits more killers from settlers who are desperate or evil. Cole's mind was already working through implications, building toward conclusions he did not like, which means holding ground is a losing strategy. Every time he attacks, even if we win, we lose people we can't afford to lose. Eventually, he wears us down through attrition. Yes, Coda's voice was flat with recognition of the trap they were in. So we cannot defend. We must attack. Take fight to his fortress, destroy his operation before he destroys us piece by piece. With what? We're scattered now, groups separated across the territory. Even if we gathered everyone together, we'd still be outnumbered. Cole searched for options that were not their tactics that might work against impossible odds. Unless we don't attack the fortress itself, unless we do what I suggested earlier, disrupt his operations, make his business unprofitable, force him to abandon the fortress to protect his interests. Coda's eyes sharpened focus, shifting from the problem to potential solutions. The captives he took. He will want ransom for them, or he will sell them. Either way, he must transport them to buyers. This creates vulnerability. Yes, moving prisoners across open territory means exposure, means opportunity to ambush. Cole nodded, seeing where she was going. And if we free his captives, we hurt him financially and prove to his buyers that he can't protect his merchandise. That makes them less willing to do business with him, which cuts off his funding. The strategy was coming together, fragile and desperate, but better than waiting passively for Dutch to attack again. But we'd need information. When he moves the prisoners, what route he takes, how many guards. And we'd need to move fast before he sells them or ransoms them to families who can't afford to pay. Tahatan spoke again, this time looking directly at Cole with something like respect emerging through exhaustion. Coda translated with a tone that suggested surprise. He says one of our scouts followed Dutch's men when they retreated. They did not go back to fortress. They went south toward the border, moving fast. This suggests Dutch plans to sell the captives immediately before we can mount rescue. He does not want to hold them and risk losing them like he lost others when I destroyed his pens. Cole's pulse quickened, tactical gears turning. If Dutch was moving prisoners south immediately, that meant he was on the road now, with limited protection. His main force would still be at the fortress or returning there, which meant the captives were probably guarded by maybe 10 men, possibly fewer, if Dutch was splitting his forces to maintain pressure on multiple Apache groups. Where does the scout think they're heading? Coda asked Tahatan. In Apache, listened to his response, then pointed to a line in the sand that represented the territorial boundary with Mexico. He thinks they are going to Tres Cruces, a mining town just across the border. Dutch has buyers there, men who run mines and need workers who cannot complain about conditions or pay. She looked at Cole, and he saw the same calculation happening behind her eyes that was happening in his mind. It is 40 miles south from the village. They left at dawn, which means they have maybe 6 hours head start. If we ride hard, we might catch them before they cross the border. But it means taking warriors, leaving this camp less protected. The choice was impossible and obvious simultaneously. Leave the women and children vulnerable to pursue a risky rescue, or stay safe and abandon 4 people to slavery and potential death. The tactical part of Cole's brain said, stay, protect what you have, don't risk everything on a gamble. The part that had married Coda and accepted responsibility for the tribe said the opposite. How many warriors would we need? 10, maybe 12. Enough to match Dutch's guards, overwhelm them before they can mount serious defense. Coda's voice carried certainty. But this leaves only 3 warriors here to protect 15 people, including children and elder. If Dutch sent men to hunt smaller groups, this camp becomes easy target. Cole looked around at the people who had come to rely on him in the span of a day, at the women who were preparing morning meal, at the children who were finally playing instead of cowering in fear, at Chaska smoking his pipe and watching this conversation with knowing eyes. What if we don't leave anyone behind? What if everyone comes? Coda stared at him like he had suggested flying to the moon. You want to take women and children on pursuit of Dutch's men? This is insane. They will slow us down, make us vulnerable. They'll slow us down if we're trying to fight. But what if fighting isn't the point? What if we use them as cover, as distraction? Cole was working through the idea as he spoke, building strategy from desperation and necessity. Dutch's men will expect warriors to come after the captives. They won't expect a whole camp to be chasing them. If we move everyone, it looks less like pursuit and more like normal travel. We get close, then the warriors hit them, while the rest of our people stay back out of range. Koda's skepticism was evident, but she was listening, working through the same calculations. This puts everyone at risk. If Dutch sent scouts and they find us on the road, we have nowhere to hide, no defensible position. True, but staying here also puts everyone at risk if Dutch sent men to hunt camps. At least on the road we're moving, we're harder to pin down, and we have a chance of accomplishing something meaningful instead of just waiting to be attacked. Tahatan spoke in Apache, his tone suggesting agreement with Cole's assessment. Koda looked surprised, then thoughtful, then nodded slowly. Tahatan says Cole is right. Staying makes us targets. Moving makes us hunters. And warriors must hunt, not hide. She turned to address the gathered people in Apache, explaining the situation and the choice they faced. Cole watched faces as she spoke, saw fear and determination and resignation in equal measure. These were people who understood that safety was illusion, that survival required risk, that choosing action over passivity sometimes meant courting death to preserve life. When Koda finished, an older woman spoke up, her voice carrying authority. Koda listened, then translated. Ayita says her daughter is among the captives Dutch took. She will come on this pursuit even if everyone else stays. She says dying while trying to save her daughter is better than living, knowing she did nothing. Other voices joined in a chorus of agreement and determination. Within minutes it was decided. They would break camp, move south toward Tres Cruces, attempt interception before Dutch's men reached the border. It was desperate, risky, likely to end badly. It was also the only choice that felt like choosing rather than accepting fate. They moved. Within an hour, the entire camp transformed into a mobile unit that stretched across the desert like a small caravan. Cole had fought in the war, had seen military units on the march, but this was different. This was families fleeing and hunting simultaneously, moving with purpose, born from necessity rather than orders from distant commanders. Koda set scouts ahead and to both sides, creating a perimeter of awareness that would warn them of threats before those threats could close distance. She positioned the warriors in a loose formation that allowed rapid response without looking overtly. Military made sure children were kept quiet and close to their mothers, assigned tasks that kept everyone focused rather than spiraling into fear. Cole rode near the front with her, marveling at the efficiency with which she commanded respect and obedience, without ever raising her voice or demanding compliance. People followed her because she had earned their trust through competence and genuine care for their well-being, leadership that was granted rather than taken. "You're good at this." He spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. At what? Leading people, making them believe things will work out even when the odds are terrible. Koda's smile was brief and tired. "I do not make them believe things will work out. I make them believe that trying is better than not trying, that action is better than passivity, that dying while fighting is better than dying while hiding." She glanced at him, her expression softening fractionally. "And you are good at this too, even though you think you are not. People listen to you because you speak truth instead of comfort. This is a valuable thing." They traveled through morning and into afternoon, the sun climbing toward its peak and heating the desert into a furnace that made breathing feel like inhaling fire. Cole's ribs protested every jarring step the horse took. His wounded leg had begun throbbing again, and exhaustion was accumulating in ways that made thinking effortful. But around him, people kept moving despite their own exhaustion, despite injuries and fear and uncertainty. Children who should have been complaining about heat and boredom instead rode silently, understanding that survival required endurance. Women who should have been preparing meals and tending homes instead carried weapons and watched horizons with the vigilance of warriors. The scout returned mid-afternoon with news that Dutch's men were 10 miles ahead, moving at a pace that suggested confidence rather than urgency. They had stopped near a water source where resting horses and prisoners, apparently convinced that pursuit was unlikely or too distant to matter. Koda called a halt, gathering the warriors to discuss tactics. Cole joined them, aware that his lack of Apache language was a disadvantage, but hoping his tactical experience might contribute something useful. Tahatan spoke first, gesturing toward the south where Dutch's men were resting. Koda translated in pieces, keeping Cole included in the discussion. "He says we have advantage of surprise. They do not expect us to catch them this quickly. If we attack now while they are resting, We can overwhelm them before they organize defense. Another warrior, an older man named Hoki, spoke with the tone of someone who had seen combat go wrong many times. Koda nodded at his points. Hoki says surprise is good, but not enough. 10 warriors against however many Dutch left to guard prisoners. If we attack and fail, they will kill captives rather than let us free them. We must be certain of success before we commit. Cole studied the terrain visible from their position, the rocky landscape that offered concealment, if you knew how to use it the way afternoon shadows created pockets of darkness that could hide approach. What if we don't attack directly? What if we create distraction, draw guards away from prisoners, then hit them while they're separated? The warriors looked at him with varying degrees of skepticism and interest. Koda translated his suggestion into Apache, then listened to responses. Tahatain says this could work but requires sacrifice. Someone must be bait, draw guards away, risk being caught or killed to give others opportunity to free captives. Her eyes met Cole's and he saw understanding there of what he was about to volunteer for. I'll be the bait. The offer came out before he could fully think through implications. Instinct overriding caution. Around him, warriors shifted in their saddles, a few speaking in Apache, with tones that suggested disagreement or concern. Koda's voice was carefully neutral when she translated. They say you are brave but foolish. You do not speak Apache, do not know territory, not skilled enough to survive if Dutch's men catch you. You will die accomplishing nothing. Maybe, but I'm also expendable. You're their best warrior. Tahatan showed his value yesterday. Hoki has experience you can't replace. I'm the outsider who's been here 2 days. If I die, the tribe loses least. The cold logic of it felt wrong, even as he spoke the words, but tactical sense demanded someone play this role, and Cole was the obvious choice by every measure that mattered. Koda's expression hardened, something flashing in her eyes that might have been anger or might have been fear, carefully controlled. You are not expendable. You are my husband. If you die, I do not just lose warrior. I lose partner. I am still learning to know. The admission carried weight that went beyond tactical considerations, emotional truth breaking through the careful control she usually maintained. Cole felt something shift in his chest, recognition that what had started as arranged marriage was becoming something more complicated. Then I'll try very hard not to die, but someone has to draw them away, and I'm the logical choice. Tahatan spoke in English, his voice carrying new respect. He is right, it should be him. But we make sure he has chance to survive. We give him fast horse, we position ourselves close. We strike the moment guards are far enough from prisoners. The warriors debated for several more minutes, voices rising and falling in Apache that Cole could not follow. Finally, Koda raised her hands, silencing them. We do as Cole suggests. He draws guards away. We free prisoners. But we prepare escape road, make sure he can reach us when guards realize they have been tricked. She looked at Cole directly, her eyes holding his with uncomfortable intensity. And you promise me you will run when it is time to run. No heroic last stands, no sacrificing yourself to buy time. You draw them away, then you ride back to us fast as you can. You understand? Cole nodded, though part of him suspected that once things went loud, plans would fall apart and improvisation would take over. But Koda needed the promise needed to believe he would not throw his life away carelessly, so he gave it to her. I understand. They spent the next hour preparing, positioning warriors in concealment near where Dutch's men were resting, giving Cole the fastest horse in their group, and making sure he knew the route back to their position. Chaska approached as Cole was checking his weapons, the old man moving with his usual quiet deliberation. You go to be bait. This is brave thing and stupid thing, like Dakota says. The elder settled beside Cole's horse, his weathered face impossible to read. I give you advice. When you draw Dutch's men away, you must make them angry enough to follow, but not angry enough to kill you immediately. This is delicate balance. Too little anger, they ignore you. Too much anger, they shoot first instead of chase. Cole absorbed this wisdom, recognizing its practical value, even if he had no idea how to calibrate anger that precisely. How do I make them angry enough, but not too much? Chaska's smile revealed gaps where teeth should have been. You insult their manhood. You say things about their mothers, their courage, their ability to fight. Men like Dutch's guards care very much about being feared and respected. When outsider mocks them, they become stupid with rage. Stupid men chase instead of think. He pulled something from his clothing, pressed it into Cole's hand. A small leather pouch that smelled of herbs and smoke. You put this on yourself if you are wounded. It will stop bleeding numb pain long enough for you to escape. My wife made it many years ago before she died. It has saved my life 3 times. Maybe it saves yours once. Cole clutched the pouch, understanding that this was a gift of considerable value from someone who had no reason to care about his survival beyond tribal obligation. Thank you, Chaska. Do not thank me yet. Thank me when you survive and we laugh about your foolish bravery. The old man shuffled away, leaving Cole alone with the horse and the weight of what he was about to attempt. Coda appeared a moment later, her face set in determined lines that did not entirely hide the fear beneath. It is time. Dutch's men have finished resting, will move soon. We must act now or lose opportunity. She moved closer, her hand finding his knee, where he sat mounted. You do not have to do this, we can find another way. There is no other way. This is the plan that gives us best chance. Cole covered her hand with his own, feeling the calluses, the strength, the warmth that spoke to life and vitality he had forgotten was possible after 3 years of isolation. I'll be back. I didn't marry you just to die before I figured out what being married means. Coda's smile was brief and fragile. You better keep this promise, because if you die, I will be very angry with you. She stepped back, releasing his knee, her expression shifting to the warrior mask he was learning to recognize as the face she wore when emotions needed to be controlled. Go. Draw them away. We will free the prisoners while they chase you. Cole nudged his horse forward, moving at an angle that would bring him visible to Dutch's men from an unexpected direction. His heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline and fear mixing into a cocktail that made his hands shake slightly on the reins. He had fought, yesterday had killed at least one man, but this was different. This was deliberately making himself a target, intentionally courting violence in ways that went against every survival instinct. He crested a small rise that put him in direct line of sight with the camp below. 10 men, maybe 12, clustered around 4 prisoners who were bound and sitting near horses. Guards were visible, but not particularly alert confidence, making them careless. Cole pulled his pistol, fired 3 shots into the air to get their attention, then shouted the most offensive things he could think of about their heritage, their courage, their masculinity. He questioned whether they were men or boys, whether they could fight or only hurt helpless women, whether their mothers knew they had raised cowards. The effect was immediate. Guards jerked around, reaching for weapons, shouting to each other in confusion and rage. Several started toward their horses, clearly intending to pursue this insulting stranger who had appeared from nowhere to mock them. Cole turned his horse and rode not at full gallop, but fast enough to suggest panic, slow enough that pursuit felt achievable. Behind him he heard shouts in the thunder of hoofbeats as Dutch's men took the bait exactly as planned. He glanced back and saw 6 riders coming after him, faces twisted with anger that Chaska had predicted. 6 out of 10 or 12 meant 4 to 6 remained with the prisoners, better odds than the warriors would have faced attacking the full group together. The plan was working. Now Cole just had to stay alive long enough for that to matter. Cole rode hard through terrain that wanted to kill him as much as the men pursuing him did. The horse stretched out beneath him, hooves pounding against rocky ground that could snap an ankle with one misplaced step, lungs working like bellows as it pushed beyond sustainable pace. Behind him, the 6 riders were closing distance, their shouts carrying fury that Chaska had predicted. But they were not shooting yet, which meant they wanted him alive, or at least wanted to catch him before they killed him. Cole took that as small victory evidence that anger was working as intended, making them stupid with rage instead of tactical. The plan had been to lead them a mile from camp, give the warriors time to free the prisoners, then circle back through rough terrain that would slow pursuit. Simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution, especially with his ribs screaming protest at every jarring impact and his wounded leg threatening to cramp from the sustained tension of staying mounted. A gunshot cracked behind him, the bullet whining past close enough that Cole felt the displacement of air. So much for them wanting him alive. He leaned low over the horse's neck, making himself a smaller target, and pushed the animal harder, despite knowing this pace could not be sustained much longer. The terrain ahead opened into a stretch of flat ground that offered speed but no cover. Cole's tactical sense screamed that this was trap, that crossing open ground while being pursued by 6 armed men was suicide, but the alternative routes would slow him down enough that they would catch him anyway. He took the open ground at full gallop, the horse's hooves eating distance when tearing at his face. More gunshots, more bullets finding air where he had been moments before. The shooters were firing from horseback at a moving target, which made accuracy difficult but not impossible. Eventually, luck would run out, mathematics would catch up, and a bullet would find something vital. Cole was halfway across the flat ground when his horse stumbled, front leg catching something hidden in the scrub. The animal recovered, but the break in rhythm cost precious seconds. The pursuers closed the gap to maybe 50 yards, close enough that Cole could hear them shouting to each other, coordinating their approach. Then the flat ground ended in a drop that Cole saw too late to avoid. Not a cliff, but a steep slope covered in loose rock that would send horse and rider tumbling if taken at speed. Cole hauled back on the reins, the horse sliding to a stop that sprayed gravel and nearly unseated him. The riders behind him were not so lucky. The first 2 saw the drop in time to veer off, circling to find safer approach. The third tried to stop like Cole had and succeeded. The fourth did not see it until too late, his horse plunging over the edge in a tangle of legs and screaming that made Cole's stomach clench. 2 riders had disappeared to find another route. 3 remained visible, and they were spreading out now, learning from their companion's mistake, approaching with more caution than they had shown before. Cole kicked his horse forward, guiding it down the slope at an angle that was safer than straight descent, but still dangerous. The animal picked its way through loose rock muscles, bunching and releasing, maintaining balance through instinct and training that Cole was grateful for beyond his ability to articulate. He reached the bottom and immediately angled west, back toward where the warriors should be finishing the rescue. The 2 riders who had veered off appeared on the ridge above, having found their own route down. 5 men now, the one with the broken horse presumably out of the chase. Cole's mount was flagging, breathing hard foam specking its neck and chest. He had pushed it too far, demanded too much, and now it was paying the price. The horse would not last another mile at this pace, which meant Cole needed to reach the rendezvous point soon or find another way to survive. A rocky outcrop appeared ahead, large enough to provide cover, but isolated enough that it would become a trap if he sheltered there. Cole's mind raced through options that were all bad. Keep riding and watch the horse collapse. Take cover and hope the warriors arrived before the 5 men killed him. Try to negotiate, which would fail because these men wanted him dead. The decision was made for him when the horse stumbled again, this time going down to its knees. Cole rolled off before the animal could fall on him, landing hard on his already injured ribs, pain exploding through his side with enough intensity that his vision whited out for several seconds. When awareness returned, he was behind the rocky outcrop with his rifle in hand and the 5 riders approaching in a loose arc that would surround his position within minutes. The fallen horse was struggling to its feet clearly, lame breathing and ragged gasps that suggested it had given everything and had nothing left. Cole fired 2 shots, forcing the riders to take cover rather than advance. He had maybe 20 rounds left, enough for a short fight, but not a sustained one. And he was trapped, pinned in place by men who had all the time in the world to wait him out or coordinate an assault from multiple angles. This was not how the plan was supposed to unfold. He was supposed to draw them away, give the warriors time, then escape through terrain advantage and speed. Instead, he was cornered, injured, with a lame horse and pursuers who were now approaching with the methodical patience of men who recognized their advantage. One of the riders shouted from behind cover, his voice carrying across the distance, "You got 2 choices, friend. Come out now with your hands up. Maybe we don't kill you immediately. Or we wait you out, pick you off when you try to run. Either way, you're dead. Only question is how much you suffer first." Cole did not waste breath responding. He watched the positions where the 5 men had taken cover, tracking movements, calculating angles. They were spreading out, flanking his position, doing exactly what he would do if he were in their situation. A bullet ricocheted off rock near his head, chips of stone stinging in his face. They were testing his position, confirming range and exposure. Another bullet followed this one closer, speaking to accuracy that would only improve as they zeroed in. Cole shifted positions, moving to different cover before return fire could find him. His ribs protested violently enough that he gasped, the sound involuntary, and loud enough that he cursed himself for giving away his condition. "Heard that? You're hurt. This gets easier by the minute." The voice was closer now, maybe 30 yards. Cole risked a quick look and saw movement behind a cluster of rocks. He fired and once, heard a curse that suggested near miss. The shooter returned fire, 3 quick shots that forced Cole back into cover. This was deteriorating fast. He needed the warriors to arrive, needed support that might not come, needed luck that he had already exhausted. The pouch Chaska had given him pressed against his chest where he had tucked it into his shirt. For wounds that would slow him down, the old man had said. Cole was not wounded yet, but give it another few minutes and that would change. Time stretched in ways that made seconds feel like minutes. Cole's world narrowed to immediate threats. The sound of boots on rock, the angle of afternoon sun that would silhouette him if he moved wrong, the weight of the rifle in hands that were starting to shake from adrenaline depletion. Then new sounds intruded. Hoofbeats approaching fast from the west, war cries in Apache that made Cole's chest loosen fractionally. The warriors were coming, had finished freeing the prisoners, were arriving exactly when needed most. But so were the other riders who had circled around. Cole heard them before he saw them coming from the north, probably the 2 who had veered off during the chase. 7 men now instead of 5, and the warriors would be riding into ambush if Cole did not warn them. He stood exposing himself deliberately, shouting as loud as his damaged ribs would allow. Ambush from the north, 7 riders. The words had barely left his mouth when bullets found him. One grazed his shoulder, tearing cloth and skin. Another caught his thigh, punching through muscle with force that spun him around and drove him to his knees. A third missed by inches, the near miss close enough that Cole felt heat from its passage. He fell behind cover, blood flowing freely from wounds that were serious, but not immediately fatal. His leg was useless now, the thigh wound deep enough that standing would be difficult. His shoulder burned, but still functioned, dominant arm intact enough to aim and shoot, even if the motion sent fresh spikes of agony through damaged tissue. Chaska's pouch. Cole fumbled it open with shaking hands, dumped the contents, dried herbs and powder that smelled medicinal and acrid, onto his palm. He pressed it against the thigh wound, first the material burning like fire as it contacted torn flesh, pain so intense that black spots danced in his vision. But beneath the pain came numbness, spreading outward from the wound, killing sensation without killing function. Cole tested his leg, found it would bear weight even if it would not hold long. Good enough. He applied the remaining powder to his shoulder, biting down on his lip hard enough to draw blood as the burning repeated. The warriors had heard his warning. Their war cries shifted in pitch and direction, spreading out instead of charging straight into the ambush. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, the sharp crack of rifles mixing with deeper booms of pistols, all of it echoing off rocks in ways that made counting shooters impossible. Cole contributed what he could, firing at shapes that appeared in his limited sight lines, not knowing if his shots connected, but maintaining pressure that forced enemies to account for him. His ammunition was running low, maybe 8 rounds left, enough for minutes, not hours. A warrior appeared on the rocks above him, a young man whose name Cole did not know, but whose face he recognized from the camp. The Apache fired twice quickly, then gestured for Cole to move. Time to retreat while the opportunity existed before Dutch's men coordinated their response and closed the trap. Cole tried to stand, made it halfway before his wounded leg gave out. The warrior scrambled down, supporting Cole's weight despite being smaller, helping him toward where horses waited with other Apache. The movement was agony, each step sending fresh blood running down Cole's leg, each jarring impact making his shoulder wound scream. They reached the horses, and someone, Tahitian Cole realized, lifted him into a saddle with strength that should not have been possible given his size. The world was going gray around the edges, blood loss and shock combining to make staying conscious effortful. Ride or die. Tahitian's voice cut through the fog, the English delivered with urgency that brooked no argument. Cole gripped the saddle horn, leaned forward over his horse's neck, and held on as the animal moved at pace that would have unseated him if determination alone had not kept him mounted. The retreat was chaos, warriors providing covering fire while moving with the coordinated efficiency of people who had practiced exactly this scenario. Cole caught glimpses of the freed captives, 4 shapes that were being hustled away from the fight. Women and child who had gone from Dutch's prisoners to Apache rescues in the span of minutes. The rescue had succeeded despite everything, despite Cole's capture, despite the ambush from the north. They had accomplished what they came for, but proven that Dutch's men were not invulnerable, demonstrated that Apache could strike fast and disappear before superior numbers could respond. But the cost was becoming clear as they put distance between themselves and the fight. Cole was losing blood faster than Chaska's medicine could prevent his vision narrowing to a tunnel that kept threatening to collapse entirely. Other warriors bore wounds, though Cole's fog made assessing their severity difficult. And behind them, Dutch's men would be regrouping, mounting pursuit, calling for reinforcements. This was not over. It had barely begun. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one distance measured by increasing weakness rather than landmarks. When they finally stopped in a canyon that offered concealment in defensible positions, Cole slid from his horse more than dismounted, landing hard enough that fresh pain jolted through his system. Coda was there immediately, her face a mask of fury and concern that she was not bothering to hide. She stripped away the powder-caked bandages on his thigh and shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle despite the anger radiating from her. You were supposed to draw them away, then escape, not get shot twice and nearly die. Her voice was tight word clipped with the effort of controlling emotions that wanted to spill over. You promised me you would not do heroic last stand. You lied. Cole tried to respond, found his voice was not working properly, words coming out slurred and indistinct. Coda made a sound that was half curse, half sob, then began cleaning his wounds with water that felt like acid against torn flesh. Stupid man, brave but stupid, just like Healer said. If you die after making me care whether you live or die, I will never forgive you. The confession broke through Cole's growing fog, registered as significant, even if his brain was too compromised to fully process implications. Coda cared. Not as tribal obligation or political alliance, but as something more personal, more vulnerable. Not planning to die. His words came out garbled, but apparently comprehensible, because Coda's expression softened fractionally. Good, because we still have much to learn about each other, and you cannot learn if you are dead. She finished cleaning the wounds, packed them with fresh herbs that burned less intensely than Chaska's powder, but still hurt enough to make Cole's jaw clench. When she wrapped them with strips torn from her own clothing, her hands were shaking slightly, betraying the control she was trying to maintain. The captives are safe, 4 women including Aida's daughter. They are traumatized but alive. This is good thing you helped make happen. Coda secured the bandages, then finally met Cole's eyes directly. But Dutch will be very angry now. We have struck him, twice defended village, freed his captives. He cannot let this go unanswered without losing respect from his men and his buyers. He will come for us with everything he has. Cole's brain, operating on diminished capacity, still managed to reach the obvious conclusion. Good, let him come. Coda stared at him like he had lost his mind along with his blood. What? If he comes after us, he's not at his fortress. Leaves it vulnerable. We can't attack fortress with 40 men inside. But if he brings those 40 men to hunt us, maybe we can get inside while he's gone. The idea felt brilliant in his current state, though Cole suspected if he was thinking clearly, he would recognize problems with the plan. Coda's expression suggested she was seeing those problems immediately. You want to attack his fortress while he hunts us with what warriors? We are scattered, wounded, exhausted. Dutch has numbers and weapons, and fortress built into rock. Don't need to attack, just need to get inside long enough to destroy what matters. His supplies, his records, whatever he needs to run his operation. Make the fortress useless so he has to abandon it. Cole was fading, words coming slower, vision tunneling further. But Coda's face suggested she was considering the idea despite its apparent insanity. This is very dangerous plan, but maybe it is only plan that works. We cannot defend against Dutch forever. We cannot run forever. Maybe attacking when he expects defense is what gives us advantage. She stood calling to the other warriors in Apache. Cole caught fragments of the discussion that followed, animated, occasionally heated voices rising and falling as they debated options that were all bad in different ways. Finally, Coda returned, her expression set in determined lines. Warriors agree with your plan. We will send scouts to watch Dutch's fortress, see when he leaves how many men he takes. If he brings most of his force to hunt us, we strike fortress with small group. Destroy what we can escape before he returns. She knelt beside Cole again, her hand finding his. But you will not be part of this attack. You are too wounded, too weak. You will stay here with captives and children recover while we take the fight to Dutch. Cole wanted to argue to insist he could help despite his condition, but the words would not form properly. Exhaustion and blood loss were pulling him under, dragging him toward darkness that felt almost welcoming after the sustained adrenaline and pain. Coda. Yes. Sorry. Got shot. Her laugh was brief and slightly hysterical. I am sorry you got shot too, but you are alive, and we freed the captives. This is better outcome than I feared. She squeezed his hand, the gesture, anchoring him as consciousness slipped. Now you rest, sleep, heal. We will talk more when you are not bleeding and delirious. Cole wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that getting shot had been worth it. If it meant those 4 women were free, wanted to explain that he was starting to understand what partnership meant, even if he was still figuring out how to be good at it. But the darkness was insistent, pulling him down into depths where pain could not follow, and consciousness was optional. The last thing he heard before the darkness took him was Coda's voice, soft and close. Do not die while I am learning to need you. Cole woke to firelight and voices speaking in Apache. His first conscious thought was that his entire body hurt, with impressive democracy. No single wound dominated all of them, competing for attention in a symphony of pain that made breathing effortful. His second thought was that being alive to feel pain was preferable to the alternative. He tried to sit up, managed to get his shoulders off the ground before his vision whited out and nausea forced him back down. A hand pressed against his chest, keeping him horizontal. You do not move yet. You have lost much blood. Body needs time to make more. Coda's voice matter-of-fact, but carrying an undercurrent of concern that had not been there before. Cole focused on her face, saw exhaustion and stress, and something else that might have been relief that he had woken up. How long? You have been unconscious for day and night. We thought maybe you would not wake, that wounds were too severe, or infection had begun. But you are strong like bull, stubborn too. She offered him water, helping him drink, despite his attempts to manage it himself. The liquid was cool and tasted better than anything Cole could remember, his body desperate for hydration after blood loss had depleted fluids faster than they could be replaced. Captives are safe, recovering. One of them has information you need to hear. Coda glanced toward the fire where several shapes sat in the flickering light. One stood and approached a woman in her 30s with hard eyes and a face that had seen too much suffering to ever fully relax. She spoke in English, the accent suggesting she had grown up around white settlers before ending up in Apache territory. My name is Elena. I was taken by Dutch's men 8 months ago. Sold to 3 different buyers before Dutch bought me back. Said I was too troublesome to keep sold, too good at escaping. Her voice carried bitter pride in that assessment. I hear you are married to Dakota, that you helped free us from Dutch's men. I have information that might matter to you and to her. Cole managed to focus on Elena's face, wondering what information could be significant enough to warrant this conversation while he was still half delirious from blood loss. I saw Dakota's sister about 2 months ago at Dutch's fortress. She was being held separate from other captives in the main building instead of the pens. Dutch said she was special merchandise that he had buyer willing to pay premium price for her. Elena's face darkened, pulled by a memory she clearly didn't want to revisit. I met Dutch only twice. First time his men dragged me to his office after I escaped from the mines. He looked at me the way a rancher looks at a horse, checking teeth, evaluating, worth calculating price. Not angry, not cruel, just empty. She paused, one hand unconsciously touching a scar on her wrist. Second time was 3 weeks before you freed us. I tried to escape again. His men wanted to kill me as example, but Dutch stopped them on them. He said, spirit is rare. We don't waste it, we break it and sell it for premium. Elena met Coda's eyes directly. He smiled when he said it, like he'd told a joke. That's what makes him dangerous. He doesn't enjoy the suffering. He just sees humans as livestock, and livestock exists to make profit. Her voice dropped lower. Your sister reminds him of me when I was first caught. He keeps her close because breaking strong women is his specialty. The longer she resists, the more certain buyers will pay. Coda had gone very still, her breathing controlled in a way that suggested fury barely leashed. How long before he sells her? Oh, soon. He's losing patience, and after you destroyed his pens, he needs to show his investors a profit. The words landed with physical impact. Cole saw Coda's entire body go rigid, saw her hands clench into fists, saw hope and fear war across her features in equal measure. My sister is alive. Coda's voice was barely above a whisper, vulnerability breaking through the warrior mask completely. She was 2 months ago. I do not know if she is still there now. Dutch sometimes moves valuable captives to different locations if he thinks they are at risk. But when I left, she was alive. Elena's expression softened, fractionally sympathy emerging through the hard edges. She is strong, your sister. She fights them every day, refuses to break even when they hurt her for defiance. Dutch says she is wild horse that needs to be broken before she can be sold. I think he enjoys the challenge of breaking her. Coda turned away, shoulders shaking with emotion too large to contain. Cole wanted to reach for her to offer comfort or support, but his body was not responding to commands with any reliability. Instead, he spoke, voice rough, but carrying as much certainty as he could project. Then we get her back. When we attack the fortress, we find her. Free her like we freed these four. Elena shook her head, her expression apologetic. It is not so simple. Dakota's sister is kept in Dutch's personal quarters, guarded constantly. Even if you reach the fortress, reaching her will be nearly impossible. Nearly impossible is not the same as completely impossible. Cole's words came out stronger than he felt, determination overriding physical weakness. We find a way. That's what we do. We find ways to accomplish things that should be impossible. Coda returned to his side, her face wet with tears. She had not bothered to hide her eyes, carrying desperate hope, tempered by years of disappointment. Elena, did my sister say anything? Any message? She said if anyone from her tribe survived, if anyone came looking for her, tell them she is still fighting. Tell them she has not forgotten her name or her people. Tell them Kinta does not break. The name hit Coda like a physical blow. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, hand covering her mouth as if to hold in emotions that wanted to overflow. Kinta, that is her name. I have not spoken it out loud in 6 months, afraid that speaking it would make her death feel more real. But she is alive. My sister is alive. She looked at Cole, and he saw in her eyes a question that went beyond tactics or a strategy. We must get her back. I know this makes attacking Fortress more dangerous, more complicated. I know it risks everyone for one person. But she is my sister. She is reason I destroyed Dutch's pens in first place. Reason I keep fighting even when everything seems hopeless. Coda's voice broke, vulnerability and determination mixing. I cannot abandon her again, even if trying to save her means I die trying. Do you understand? Cole understood more than she probably realized. Understood the guilt of leaving someone behind, the way it ate at you until nothing else mattered, the desperate need to correct past failures even when logic said it was too late. We get her back, whatever it takes. No one gets left behind this time. The promise was bigger than he had any right to make, committed them to a course that would probably get people killed. But Coda's expression shifted, something settling in her face that suggested the promise mattered more than its feasibility. Thank you. 2 words, simple and insufficient, carrying weight that transcended their literal meaning. Coda leaned forward, pressing her forehead briefly against his in a gesture that felt more intimate than anything physical they had shared yet. When she pulled back, her eyes held something new, something that looked like trust earned rather than granted. You rest now. Heal. We will plan attack when you are stronger, when we have more information about Fortress and Dutch's movements. She stood to leave, then paused. Cole, you asked what kind of man you were. When I answered, I said, I wanted man who stays, who fights, who sees me as partner. You have shown me all these things in 2 days. This is more than I expected, more than I had right to hope for. She looked at him directly, no masks, no defenses. I am glad Mongas demanded this marriage. I am glad you stayed instead of running. And I am glad you are not dead, even though you tried very hard to die today. Then she was gone, leaving Cole alone with pain and exhaustion and the strange warmth that came from being seen by someone who understood what seeing actually meant. He closed his eyes, letting the darkness take him again, knowing that when he woke there would be planning and danger and probably more pain. But for now he had earned rest, had proven something to himself, And Dakota had taken the first real steps toward becoming the kind of man who chose action over paralysis, partnership over isolation, life over the slow death of guilt and regret. The fever came during the night, his body's response to trauma and infection taking hold despite Coda's herbal treatments. Cole drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid enough to recognize his surroundings, sometimes lost in dreams that mixed past and present into confused narratives where Ethan and Dutch were the same person, where Rebecca and Coda blurred together, where the fortress and the burning ranch occupied the same space. In the coherent moments, he heard voices discussing strategy in Apache, occasionally switching to English when they wanted to include him in the conversation, even though he was not conscious enough to contribute. He caught fragments about scouts reporting Dutch had left the fortress with 30 men, about debate over whether this created opportunity or trap, about disagreement on how to extract Kinta from Dutch's personal quarters. Chaska's voice penetrated the fog more than once, the old man apparently assigned to watching over Cole during the fever's worst phases. He spoke in English, even when Cole was not conscious enough to respond, filling silence with stories about his own youth, about battles he had survived, about people he had loved and lost. "You are strong, Cole Brennan. Your body fights hard. But you must want to wake up, must want to live more than you want to rest. There is woman who needs you, sister, who needs rescuing tribe that is learning to accept you. These are reasons to fight through fever." The old man's words became anchors, things to hold on to, so when the fever tried to pull him under completely. Cole focused on them, on Coda's face when Elena had confirmed Kinta was alive, on the promise he had made to help get her back, on the partnership that was forming despite impossible circumstances. He did want to wake up, did want to live, did want to see this through, even if the ending was uncertain. When the fever finally broke on the third day, Cole woke to afternoon light in immediate awareness that his body had paid serious price for the rescue attempt. His thigh wound throbbed with each heartbeat, but no longer leaked blood through the bandages. His shoulder had stiffened, but still functioned when he tested range of motion. But functioning and fighting were different things. The next 10 days passed in a frustrating rhythm of healing and waiting. Coda visited daily, checking his wounds, bringing news from scouts. Dutch was hunting them, moving from camp to camp, growing more frustrated with each empty village he found. His men were getting tired, making mistakes. "Good," Cole said on the seventh day, testing his leg. It held his weight now, though the deep ache remained. "Angry, tired enemies make errors. You heal faster than healer expected." Coda sat beside him, close enough that he could smell sage smoke in her hair. "She says maybe 3 more days. Then we strike fortress." "Why wait?" "Because if you collapse halfway through the raid, I have to carry you out. And you are heavy." Her attempt at humor couldn't hide the concern beneath it. Cole reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity that had grown between them. 3 more days, then. Teach me more Apache while we wait." "This will take more than 3 days." "Then teach me the important words, like run and behind you, and you were right." Coda's laugh was brief but genuine. "The last one you already know in every language." On the 10th day after the rescue, scouts reported Dutch had split his force, 20 men still hunting, 20 returned to the fortress. It was time. Coda spoke to the gathered warriors, her voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who had thought through all possibilities. "We have best opportunity we will have. Only 20 men at fortress, possibly fewer. If we move tonight, we strike before Dutch realizes where we are." Cole tested his leg one final time. The wound still ached, would probably ache for months, but it would hold. "Tonight," he agreed. The word came out before Cole fully considered what he was committing to, but Coda's expression suggested she had expected this answer. "You are still wounded, still weak. You will slow us down, might get yourself or others killed if you cannot keep pace. I'll keep pace, and you need every fighter you can get if you're going into that fortress. Besides, I made a promise to help get Kinta back. Can't do that from here." Coda studied his face, searching for something she apparently found satisfactory. "You are stubborn man. This is frustrating quality, but also useful quality. Very well, you come with us, but you follow orders. You do not do anything heroic that gets you more shot, and if I say you stay back, you stay back." "Agreed." Cole nodded, knowing that once they were inside the fortress, those conditions would probably go out the window, but understanding that Coda needed the promise. Agreed. She helped him sit up, the movement sending fresh spikes of pain through his system, but nothing that made him regret the decision. If he was going to heal anyway, might as well heal while doing something useful rather than lying around waiting. We leave at sunset, 6 warriors, you and me. Small group fast in and out before Dutch returns or before guards realize we are there. Tahatan will lead group here, protect captives and others. If we do not return by dawn, they scatter, move to different locations, assume we failed. The stakes were clear and brutal. Success meant destroying Dutch's operation and freeing Quinta. Failure meant death or capture and left the others exposed. There was no middle ground, no partial victory that counted as anything except another kind of defeat. Cole spent the remaining hours before sunset preparing as best he could with a body that was maybe 60% functional. He checked weapons, redistributed ammunition, tested his wounded leg to confirm it would bear weight even if it would not hold long. The other warriors watched his preparations with expressions that ranged from skepticism to respect, apparently impressed that he was choosing to come despite his obvious limitations. Tahatan approached as Cole was strapping on the gun belt that had survived everything so far. You should stay. Let warriors do warrior work. It might have been advice or might have been challenge. Cole decided to take it as the former. Probably, but Coda needs every person she can get, and I need to prove I can contribute more than just good ideas and bad luck. Tahatan's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been approval. You learn fast, like I said before. This is a good thing for outsider. Most outsiders stay outsiders forever because they do not learn. You learn, you adapt. You become more Apache than some Apache. He paused, then added in a tone that suggested significance. My people are starting to see you as one of us. Not because you married to Coda, but because you fight beside us, bleed beside us, risk death beside us. This matters more than ceremony or blood. Action matters. The observation landed with unexpected weight. Cole had been so focused on surviving that he had not considered how others perceived him, whether his acceptance into the tribe was nominal or genuine. Tahatan's words suggested it was becoming the latter earned through choices rather than granted through obligation. Thank you, that means more than you probably know. Tahatan nodded once, then walked away, leaving Cole alone with preparations and the growing awareness that he was no longer just playing the role of tribal member. He was becoming one piece by piece, choice by choice, wound by wound. Sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire reflecting off distant clouds. The 8 of them mounted horses that had been selected for endurance rather than speed, this mission requiring sustained effort over multiple hours rather than quick sprint. Coda gave final instructions in Apache, her voice carrying authority that everyone responded to immediately. Then she switched to English clearly for Cole's benefit. We ride to Fortress, approach from west, where scouts report weakest surveillance. We wait until full dark, then we enter through supply entrance that Elena says is usually unguarded at night. 6 of us spread through Fortress, at fires, destroy supplies, create chaos. You and I go to Dutch's quarters, find Quinta, extract her. She looked at him directly. If we cannot find her quickly, we leave without her. I know this sounds cruel, but 8 people cannot hold Fortress against even 10 guards for long. We get what we can get, then we escape before advantage is lost. The tactical sense was sound, even if the emotional cost was brutal. Cole nodded understanding, knowing that Coda was preparing herself for the possibility that Quinta could not be saved, that hope would have to bend to reality. They rode into darkness that felt thick enough to touch the moon, not yet risen, only stars providing illumination. The horses moved with careful attention to footing, sensing their riders' tension, responding to subtle cues that kept them quiet and controlled. The fortress appeared after 2 hours of steady riding, built into rock wall, exactly as descriptions had suggested. From this distance, it looked impregnable defensive position designed by someone who understood military architecture. But Elena had been right about the western approach. The rock face there was less sheer, provided more concealment, and the supply entrance was indeed minimally guarded if it was guarded at all. They dismounted a quarter-mile out, left 2 warriors with the horses, continued on foot, with weapons and supplies for starting fires. The approach took another hour, every step deliberate, every sound monitored awareness. That discovery meant death, keeping everyone hyper-focused. The supply entrance was a cave mouth partially concealed by brush, wide enough for wagons to pass through, but hidden well enough that you would miss it if you were not looking specifically. No guards were visible, which could mean none were posted, or could mean they were inside where lamplight would not reveal their positions. Coda gestured, and 4 warriors slipped inside, moving like shadows that made no sound. Minutes passed with Cole and Coda waiting outside, prepared to provide support or cover retreat if the initial entry was compromised. Finally, an owl call Apache signal for all clear, and they entered. The interior was cooler, carved from rock, with support beams suggesting expansion beyond natural caves. Supplies lined the walls, barrels of flour and salt, crates of ammunition, medical supplies, tools, everything necessary for sustaining 40 men in remote location. Perfect targets for the destruction they planned. The 4 warriors began their work, spreading kerosene, setting slow fuses that would give them time to escape before flames really took hold. Cole and Coda moved deeper into the complex, following Elena's directions toward the section where Dutch kept his personal quarters and where Kinta was supposedly held. They encountered the first guard near what looked like storage for valuables. He died quietly, Coda's knife across his throat before he could shout, warning, his body lowered silently to the ground. The violence was efficient and necessary, but Cole felt his stomach clench, watching life leave the man's eyes. No time for reflection. They kept moving deeper into the fortress, past rooms that held bunks for guards, past an armory that the warriors would have loved to raid if they had time, past a room that held ledgers and documents that probably contained information about Dutch's entire operation. Finally, they reached a door that was different from the others, heavier, reinforced with a lock that suggested whatever was inside mattered enough to protect seriously. Coda tried the handle, found it secured, looked at Cole with question in her eyes. He examined the lock, recognized it as type he had picked before, pulled the thin wire he kept in his boot for exactly this kind of situation. The mechanism was stiff, but not impossibly complex, yielding after several minutes of careful manipulation. The lock clicked open with sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Coda pushed the door open, a knife-ready, body tense for combat. Inside was a room furnished better than anything else they had seen, the actual bed, table, chairs, even a mirror, which was luxury in this environment. And sitting on the bed, hands bound, was a young woman who looked enough like Coda that there was no question of identity. Kinta's eyes went wide when she saw her sister, recognition followed immediately by disbelief, followed by hope, so intense it was painful to witness. Coda was across the room in 2 strides, cutting the bonds, pulling her sister into embrace that spoke to 6 months of grief and guilt finally releasing. They spoke rapidly in Apache words, tumbling over each other, both crying now without shame or attempt to hide it. Cole stood watch at the door, giving them this moment, aware that time was running out, but unwilling to interrupt reunion that had been earned through more suffering than he could fully comprehend. A shout echoed from somewhere deeper in the fortress, guards, discovering the fires, raising alarm that would bring everyone running. The moment was over, reality intruding with urgency that could not be ignored. "We have to go. Now." Cole's voice cut through their reunion. Coda nodded, helping Kinta to her feet. The younger woman moved slowly, clearly injured or weakened by captivity, leaning heavily on her sister's support. They made it maybe 20 feet before running into more guards, 3 of them responding to the alarm, weapons drawn. The narrow corridor prevented easy maneuvering, forced confrontation in close quarters, where Cole's wounded leg was liability rather than asset. He fired first, the pistol's report deafening in the enclosed space. 1 guard went down. The other 2 returned fire, bullets ricocheting off stone walls, creating chaos of sound and impact. Coda fired next, her shot catching the 2nd guard in the chest. The 3rd guard charged, apparently out of ammunition or choosing close combat, knife raised. Cole tried to intercept, but his leg gave out, pain and weakness finally overwhelming determination. He fell and the guard was on him, knife descending toward his throat. Then Kinta was there, moving faster than someone who had been captive for months should have been able to move. She grabbed a piece of broken wood from the floor, swung it with all her remaining strength, caught the guard across the temple, hard enough to stun him. Coda finished what her sister started, knife, finding the guard's kidney, dropping him before he could recover. They pulled Cole upright, supporting his weight between them, moving as fast as the 3 of them could manage while Cole's wounded leg dragged uselessly. Behind them, the sounds of chaos were growing, more guards responding, fires beginning to really burn, smoke filling corridors that had nowhere to vent. They emerged into the supply cave to find the 4 warriors waiting, faces urgent. One spoke in rapid Apache, gesturing toward the entrance, and Koda's expression went grim. More guards outside. They know we are here. They are blocking escape route. She looked around the cave, tactical mind working through impossible problems, searching for solutions that might not exist. Cole's brain, operating through fog of pain and exhaustion, suddenly remembered something Elena had said during her descriptions of the fortress. Elena mentioned ventilation shafts, natural caves that carry smoke out when they cook. If those caves exist, they have to exit somewhere, might be another way out. Koda's eyes sharpened, hope emerging through desperation. She called to the warriors in Apache, explaining something that made them spread out through the cave, searching walls and ceiling for openings that might lead elsewhere. One of them, a warrior named Nahala, called out from the back of the cave, pointing to a dark opening partially hidden by stored barrels. Too small for a grown man to pass comfortably, but maybe large enough to squeeze through if desperation provided sufficient motivation. The fires were really burning now, smoke thick enough to make breathing difficult, heat building toward levels that would cook them alive if they stayed much longer. They had maybe minutes before the entire fortress became tomb rather than target. Go, everyone through the shaft, now. Koda's voice carried command that moved people instantly. The warriors went first, pulling themselves through the opening with effort that looked painful. Kinta followed, her smaller frame making passage easier despite her weakened state. Then Koda, then Cole, his wounded leg making the climb nearly impossible. Hands grabbed him from above, pulling Koda and warriors working together to haul him through opening that scraped his shoulders and made his ribs scream protest. Finally, he was through, lying on cold stone in a tunnel that angled upward toward what might have been fresh air or might have been more smoke. They crawled for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the tunnel so narrow in places that Cole had to exhale completely to squeeze through his body, scraping against rock that had no mercy for wounded men. Behind them, sounds of flames and collapsing structure suggested the fortress was consuming itself exactly as intended. Finally, blessedly, the tunnel opened onto a rock face 20 feet above the ground, the exit hidden by overhang that made it invisible from below. They lowered themselves down using ropes one of the warriors had thought to bring each person's descent, controlled by those who had already reached the ground. When everyone was down, they ran despite exhaustion, despite injuries, despite Kinta barely able to stand without support. They ran because the fortress was dying behind them, because guards would soon realize their prey had escaped, because every second of delay meant higher chance of recapture. They reached the horses to find the two warriors who had stayed behind, maintaining defensive position, weapons ready, clearly having heard the chaos and prepared for worst. Relief flooded faces on both sides, brief but genuine, before survival instinct reasserted itself, and they mounted up. The ride back was brutal, sustained gallop through darkness that could kill as easily as pursuit horses pushed beyond reasonable limits, riders barely maintaining saddles. Cole's wounds reopened, blood soaking through bandages, but there was no time to stop, no opportunity to do anything except keep moving and hope they reached safety before bodies gave out completely. Dawn was breaking when they finally reached the camp where Tahatan and the others waited. People emerged from shelters, expressions shifting from anxiety to relief when they saw 8 riders returning instead of the empty horses that would have signaled disaster. Cole slid from his horse, managed 3 steps before his leg finally quit, sending him sprawling into dirt that felt softer than any bed he had ever known. Hands lifted him, voices spoken Apache with tones that suggested concern, and somewhere nearby, Koda was reuniting with her sister properly, tears and laughter mixing in ways that made Cole's chest tight despite his own pain. They had done it. Attacked fortress, destroyed supplies, freed Kinta, escaped with everyone alive. It was impossible and had happened anyway. Proof that determination and desperation could sometimes overcome odds that should have been insurmountable. Cole's last conscious thought before exhaustion claimed him was that maybe staying had been the right choice after all, that running would have meant missing this moment, missing the chance to help accomplish something that actually mattered. He had been wrong about many things in his life, but staying instead of running was not one of them. Cole woke to voices arguing in Apache and the smell of smoke that was not from cooking fires. His body protested consciousness, every wound announcing its presence with renewed vigor. But the urgency in those voices cut through exhaustion and demanded awareness. He forced his eyes open, found himself inside a wickiup that was not the one he remembered falling asleep in. Daylight filtered through gaps in the structure, suggesting he had lost another full day to unconsciousness. The arguing voices were clearer now, Coda and Mongas, the tone carrying weight of disagreement between people who respected each other but fundamentally differed on strategy. Cole pushed himself upright, despite his body's protest moving toward the entrance, with the careful deliberation of someone whose wounds were fresh enough to matter. He emerged into chaos that made his chest tighten with recognition of how bad things had become while he slept. The camp was being struck, people packing supplies, and preparing to move with the urgent efficiency of those who knew delay meant death. Warriors were checking weapons, mothers were quieting children, elders were moving as fast as age allowed. And in the center of it all, Coda and Manga stood face to face, her expression defiant, his carved from stone. Coda saw Cole emerge and switched to English mid-sentence, clearly wanting him to understand the argument. My father says we must scatter again, split into smaller groups, make Dutch hunt us across entire territory until he exhausts himself. I say we stand and fight, use the advantage we gained by destroying his fortress. Mongas's voice was controlled, but carrying an edge Cole had not heard before. Dakota thinks because we burned his supplies and freed captives, Dutch is weakened. She forgets he still has 30 men all armed, all angry, all looking for someone to kill. We have maybe 20 warriors, half of them wounded with women and children to protect. The chief looked at Cole, his flint eyes assessing. You are awake. Good. Tell my daughter her plan is suicide. Maybe she will listen to husband if she will not listen to father. Cole's brain was still catching up, working through fog of pain and exhaustion to understand what had happened during his unconsciousness. Coda filled in the gaps, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Scouts report Dutch returned to fortress, found it destroyed, went into rage that scared even his own men. He executed 2 guards for failing to prevent attack, then swore he would kill every Apache he could find until we give up person who planned the raid. She paused, her expression shifting to something more complicated. Scouts also report he knows it was me who led attack. Someone told him maybe Elena before we freed her, maybe one of the guards who survived the fires. Dutch says he wants me specifically. Says if I surrender, he will let tribe live. If I do not surrender, he will hunt us all until no one is left. The implications settled over Cole like cold water. Dutch was offering exactly the kind of ultimatum that tore communities apart. Sacrifice one to save many a choice that felt impossible because either answer was wrong. You are not surrendering. Cole spoke before thinking through the politics of contradicting Mongas, but Coda's expression suggested his support mattered more than tribal hierarchy in this moment. This is what I tell her. Surrendering means death or worse. Dutch will not honor. His word will kill her slowly and still hunt tribe anyway. Mongas turned his attention to Cole fully. But she wants to face him, wants to draw him into battle where warriors can kill him and end this threat permanently. She thinks destroying fortress made him desperate, made him careless. I think it made him dangerous in a different way. The chief's jaw tightened. And she wants you to fight beside her, wants to risk husband. I demanded she marry, wants to gamble both of you on strategy that might fail. Tell me, Cole Brennan, do you think this is wise? The question was not really asking for Cole's opinion. It was testing whether Cole would support Coda's recklessness or show the sense Mongas hoped he had learned. But Cole had spent 3 years running from confrontations, and he understood viscerally what happened. When you kept running, eventually you were too tired to fight, even when fighting was the only option left. Dutch is coming whether we scatter or stand. Scattering just means he picks us off in smaller groups, means every encounter favors him because we are divided. Standing means we choose the ground, choose when to engage, use the numbers we have in ways that matter. Cole held Mongas's gaze. I have run from confrontations before. It does not work. Eventually you have to stand somewhere, might as well be ground you choose with people you trust beside you. Mongas studied him for long moment, expression unreadable. Then he turned to Coda, his voice carrying resignation rather than agreement. Your husband is as foolish as you are. This is what happens when outsiders marry into tribe. They learn bad habits from warriors who think courage is substitute for wisdom. But underneath the criticism, Cole heard something else. Acceptance, maybe, or recognition that arguing was futile when both Coda and Cole had already decided. Very well, we prepare to fight, but we do it my way with tactics that give us chance instead of just glorious death. You will listen to my commands, both of you, or I will tie you up and leave you behind while warriors do the actual fighting." Koda's face lit with gratitude and determination mixed together. "Thank you, Father. Do not thank me until we survive, and do not expect me to be happy about plan that will probably get my daughter and her fool husband killed." Manga stalked away, barking orders in Apache that set people moving with renewed purpose. Koda turned to Cole, her expression shifting from warrior to something more vulnerable. "You did not have to support me. You could have agreed with my father, could have stayed safe while I did this alone." Cole managed a smile despite the pain radiating from multiple wounds. "I did not marry you to watch from safety while you fight alone. Besides, someone needs to make sure you do not do something heroic that gets you killed. Apparently, that is my job now." Her laugh was brief but genuine, some of the tension releasing from her shoulders. "This is fair. I have same job with you, keeping you from dying while you try to prove you are brave." She moved closer, her hand finding his fingers intertwining with comfortable familiarity that had developed faster than Cole would have thought possible a week ago. "Kinta is safe. This matters to me more than I can say. You helped make that possible. Whatever happens with the Dutch, whatever comes next, I want you to know that you have given me back something I thought was lost forever." Cole squeezed her hand, searching for words that could capture what the last week had meant to him. The shift from isolation to belonging, from running to standing, from guilt-ridden existence to something that felt like actual living. "You gave me something back, too. Purpose, maybe. Or just proof that I was capable of choosing differently than I had been. Either way, I am glad I stayed." Koda's smile was soft, carrying warmth that went beyond gratitude or attraction to something deeper that neither of them had words for yet. "When this is over, when Dutch is dead and we are somehow still alive, we should talk about what our marriage means. Really talk, not just tactical discussions between battles." "I would like that." The moment stretched fragile and precious before reality intruded, with Tahatan approaching to report that scouts had spotted Dutch's force moving toward their position. The interlude was over, replaced by urgency that left no room for anything except preparation and survival. Mongas had chosen their defensive ground with the tactical sense of someone who had survived decades of combat, a narrow valley with steep walls on three sides, and a single approach that could be defended by relatively few warriors. Water was available from a spring, escape routes existed through paths only Apache knew, and the high ground offered advantages that would cost Dutch's men dearly if they tried frontal assault. But Dutch had survived the war and years of territorial violence through being smarter than his enemies expected. When his force appeared at the valley entrance, 3 hours after the scouts' warning, they did not charge in blindly. They stopped just out of rifle range, spreading out in formation that spoke to military discipline, and waited. Cole stood beside Koda on the high ground, watching Dutch's men establish positions with the creeping certainty that this was not going to be a simple battle. Dutch was planning something, coordinating, something demonstrating the patience of someone who understood that rushing into defended positions got people killed. Then a rider separated from Dutch's formation, approaching under white flag that was supposed to indicate peaceful intent, but felt more like mockery given the circumstances. He stopped 50 yards from the valley entrance, close enough for his voice to carry, but far enough that one shooter could not easily kill him. "Dutch Van Bergen wants to talk. Says he will meet with Dakota and her white husband, just the three of them, no weapons. Says maybe we can end this without everyone dying." The proposal was ridiculous and dangerous, and probably a trap, but Mongas surprised Cole by considering it seriously. If Dutch wants to talk, it means he is not as confident as he appears. Men who are certain they will win do not negotiate, they attack. The chief looked at Koda and Cole. "You will go, both of you. I will position warriors to kill Dutch if he tries anything. But you will hear what he has to say. Maybe he offers something worth considering. Probably he tries to kill you both. Either way, we learn something." Koda started to argue, then stopped, recognizing the tactical sense, even if she hated the risk. She nodded once, then turned to Cole. "You do not have to come. This is between me and Dutch." "No, it is between us and Dutch. We face him together." They descended from the high ground, moving toward the valley entrance where Dutch waited under his white flag. As they got closer, Cole got his first clear look at the man who had caused so much suffering. Dutch Van Bergen was maybe 50 tall and broad-shouldered, with military bearing that had not faded despite years away from uniform. His face was weathered by sun and violence mapped with scars that told stories he probably enjoyed recounting. But his eyes were what struck Cole most cold and calculating, carrying intelligence that made him more dangerous than simple brutality could have achieved. Dutch studied them as they approached his gaze, moving from Coda to Cole and back again. So you are the Apache bitch who destroyed my fortress. And you are the white fool who married into a war he does not understand. Interesting pair. His voice carried contempt, but also something that might have been respect. I have lost significant investment because of you two. $20,000 in freed captives, another $50,000 in supplies and infrastructure. My buyers are angry, my men are demoralized, and my reputation is damaged. Dutch paused, letting that sink in. But I am also a practical man. I can rebuild fortress recapture or purchase new inventory, restore what you damaged. Or I can waste time and men hunting you across territory until we are all dead or broken. Neither option appeals to me. Coda's voice was flat, empty of emotion. What do you want, Dutch? I want compensation for my losses. You took from me, I take from you. Fair trade. He gestured toward the Apache warriors visible on the high ground. You have maybe 20 warriors. I have 30 men all armed with good rifles. If we fight, I probably win, but lose half my force doing it. That is not acceptable business math. Dutch's smile was cold. So I offer trade. You give me 10 people, your choice, warriors or women or children, does not matter to me. I sell them, recover some of my losses, and I leave your tribe alone. Everyone else goes back to their normal lives. No more hunting, no more battles. Clean ending. The proposal was monstrous, asking them to sacrifice 10 people to save the others, reduce human beings to transaction that balanced his ledgers. Cole felt rage building in his chest, hot and immediate, overwhelming the tactical part of his brain that was trying to analyze whether this was serious offer or elaborate setup. Coda spoke before Cole could, her voice carrying ice. You ask me to sell my own people to save my own people. This is not trade. This is evil trying to make itself seem reasonable. Evil is just word people use for choices they do not like. Dutch shrugged, the gesture casual. I do what I do because it is profitable. You fight me because you think it is righteous. We are both just pursuing our interests with different justifications. Do not pretend you are somehow better than me just because you wrap your violence in noble language. Cole found his voice, anger making the words come hard. There is difference between defending people and enslaving them. If you cannot see that difference, then you are beyond reasoning with. Dutch's attention shifted to Cole fully, his eyes narrowing with interest. I know you. Took me a while to place the name, but I know it now. Cole Brennan from Silverton. Brother died in fire. Family said you killed him. You have been running ever since. The revelation hit Cole like physical blow, old shame and guilt flooding back despite the work he had done to move past them. Dutch's smile widened, sensing advantage. So you lecture me about morality while running from your own crimes. At least I am honest about what I am. You pretend to be hero when you are just killer who got lucky. Coda moved between them, her body language protective despite her own injuries. What Cole was or did before does not matter. What matters is what he chooses now. And he chooses to stand with me, with my people, against men like you who think everything can be bought or sold. Dutch studied them both, calculation visible behind his eyes. Very well, no trade then. We do this the hard way. I will burn your entire tribe out of that valley, starting with the women and children. I will make you watch your people die slowly until you wish you had accepted my generous offer. He turned his horse, preparing to leave, then paused. But before I do, I want you to know something. Your sister, the one I kept separate from other captives, she fought so hard, resisted so completely that I actually respected her. Would have been shame to break someone with that much spirit. Coda went rigid, her hand moving toward the knife at her belt, despite the white flag protocol. She is free now. You cannot hurt her. True, but I can hurt others. And I will make sure every person who dies today dies knowing it is because you chose pride over pragmatism, chose to fight rather than negotiate, chose your own righteousness over their lives. Dutch rode away before either of them could respond, his words hanging in the air like poison. When he rejoined his men, Cole saw him giving orders, saw the formation shift in ways that suggested preparation for assault. They returned to the high ground where Mongus waited, his expression making clear he had expected exactly this outcome. The hours before sunset felt longer than the entire week before. Cole stood watch with Coda on the high ground, watching Dutch's men prepare across the valley. They moved with military precision, checking weapons, distributing ammunition, eating without speaking. Veterans who knew what was coming. He will attack at sunset, Coda said quietly. Sun at his back. Old cavalry trick. Your father knows. Knowing and surviving are different things. She was silent for a moment, hand resting on her bow. Then, without looking at him, if we do not survive this, we will. I want you to know I would choose this again. She turned to face him, her expression vulnerable in a way he'd rarely seen. The marriage, the fighting, everything. Even knowing how it ends, I would choose you. The words hit harder than any bullet could. Cole took her hand, feeling the calluses, the warmth, the life in it. Then we survive. Because there are things I want to tell you when we're not about to die. What things? Things that shouldn't be said before a battle. Coda pressed her fingers against his lips, silencing him. Then we survive, and you tell me after. Below them, warriors took positions. Mothers sheltered children. Mongus gave final orders. The tribe prepared to defend what mattered. The sun touched the western horizon, painting everything red. Dutch's attack came at sunset, the timing calculated to put the sun at his back and in the defender's eyes. Dutch's attack came at sunset, the timing calculated to put the sun at his back and in the defender's eyes. His men advanced in coordinated groups, using cover effectively, laying down suppressive fire that forced the Apache to keep their heads down. This was not amateur assault. This was military tactics applied by men who had survived war and learned its lessons. But Mongus had anticipated this, had positioned his warriors to create crossfire that punished any advance, had identified killing zones where Dutch's men would be most exposed. The battle developed into brutal arithmetic, attackers gaining ground at cost of casualties, defenders holding position, but expending ammunition they could not easily replace. Cole fired from his position beside Coda, his wounded leg propped against a rock to keep weight off it, his shoulder screaming protest every time he worked the rifle's action. Beside him, Coda moved between targets with efficiency that spoke to years of practice. Each shot deliberate and carefully aimed, making ammunition count in ways that kept their small section of the line from being overwhelmed. Tahatan appeared from the left, blood streaming from a wound on his head, but still fighting, calling out warnings in Apache when he spotted Dutch's men trying to flank their position. Other warriors maintained similar vigilance, creating network of awareness that made surprise difficult, even when terrain favored attackers. The first wave broke against defensive positions. After 20 minutes of sustained combat, Dutch's men retreating to regroup and treat their wounded. Cole counted at least 4 bodies left behind, evidence that the Apache were exacting cost. But he also saw that 3 warriors on the line were down, and ammunition was running low enough that Mongus was redistributing rounds from those who had them to those who needed them most. The second wave came harder, Dutch apparently having learned from the first assault. This time his men used smoke to obscure sight lines, advanced more aggressively, committed to breakthrough rather than probing attack. The fighting became close quarters chaos, bullets flying in all directions, warriors and attackers mixing in hand-to-hand combat that turned the valley floor into nightmare of violence. Cole lost track of Coda during the worst of it, his attention consumed by simply surviving as Dutch's men pushed deeper into the valley than they had in the first wave. He fired until his rifle was empty, switched to pistol, fired that until it too ran dry. Then he was fighting with knife and rock and desperate improvisation, his wounded body operating on adrenaline and refusal to die after surviving everything up to this point. He saw Mongus engaged with 2 of Dutch's men simultaneously, the chief's massive frame and brutal efficiency putting both down but taking wounds that left him bleeding heavily. He saw Tahatan defending position where women and children had sheltered the young warrior, fighting with rage that came from protecting those who could not protect themselves. He saw Chaska impossibly wading into combat with a club that should have been too heavy for his age, laying about with strength that defied his years. And then he saw Dutch himself dismounted and advancing with pistol in hand, his face set in lines that spoke to fury barely controlled. The man was coming straight toward where Cole last saw Coda, moving with purpose that suggested he knew exactly who he was hunting. Cole tried to intercept his wounded leg, giving out halfway, sending him sprawling. Dutch saw him fall, smiled with genuine satisfaction, and raised his pistol to finish what his men had started. The shot never came. Kinta appeared from nowhere, her small frame seeming impossibly fragile compared to Dutch's bulk, but the rock she swung caught him across the temple hard enough to stagger him. Dutch turned on her, raising his pistol, and this time the shot came. But it was not from Dutch's pistol. Coda had appeared behind him, her own weapon drawn, the shot catching Dutch center mass and spinning him around. He stayed on his feet, impossibly returning fire, even as blood spread across his chest, the bullet catching Coda in the side and dropping her. Cole was moving before conscious thought, ignoring his leg's protest, covering the distance between himself and Dutch with desperate momentum. He hit the man low, his remaining strength channeled into tackle that brought them both down hard. They grappled on the ground, Dutch's size advantage offset by his wound, both men fighting with the knowledge that whoever lost would die. Dutch's hands found Cole's throat, squeezing with strength that cut off air and made vision narrow. Cole's hands fumbled for the knife at his belt, fingers clumsy from oxygen deprivation finally closing around the handle. He drove the blade into Dutch's side once or twice, 3 times before the grip on his throat loosened. Dutch's eyes widened, surprise replacing fury, his mouth working to form words that would not come. Then he went still, his body settling with the finality of something that had been animate and was now simply meat. Cole rolled away, gasping for air, his vision swimming. Around him the battle was winding down, Dutch's men breaking and retreating now that their leader was dead. The Apache warriors pursued for a distance, then let them go, understanding that the threat was broken even if individual enemies survived. Cole crawled to where Coda had fallen, his leg completely useless, now leaving trail of blood behind him. She was on her side, hand pressed to the wound, her face pale but conscious. Kinta was already there, applying pressure, speaking in Apache with tone that demanded her sister stay awake. Coda. His voice came out raspy, throat damage from Dutch's grip, but Coda's eyes found his, and something like relief flooded her features. You are alive. This is good. Means I do not have to be angry with you for dying. Her attempt at humor could not hide the pain in her voice, the way her breathing was shallow and labored in ways that suggested the wound was serious. I'm sorry I got shot. Again, this is becoming bad habit. Cole reached her side, his hand finding hers, fingers intertwining with grip that was too weak to be reassuring. Around them, people were moving, tending wounded, counting the dead, beginning the grim work of sorting survival from loss. But in that moment, Cole's world narrowed to Coda's face, to the way her eyes held his with trust and affection and something deeper that neither had named yet. You saved me from Dutch. You could have stayed down, let him finish what he started. But you came anyway. Of course I came. You are my wife, my partner, the person I choose to stand with even when standing is stupid and probably fatal. Cole managed to smile despite everything. Besides, someone had to make sure you did not die doing something heroic. Apparently that is my job. Coda's laugh turned into cough that brought blood to her lips, evidence that the wound was internal and serious. Kinta was shouting for healers, for anyone with medicine, her voice carrying desperation that made Cole's chest tighten with understanding of what losing Coda would mean. The healer who had treated them before appeared, the ancient woman moving with surprising speed, pushing Cole and Kinta aside to access the wound. She worked with efficient focus, her hands steady despite the chaos surrounding them, muttering in Apache in tone that suggested she was not happy with what she was finding, but was not giving up either. Time became elastic, stretching and compressing unpredictably. Cole stayed beside Coda, his hand in hers, watching her face for signs that she was slipping away or staying present. Around them, the battle's aftermath was being processed. 12 Apache dead, including 2 warriors Cole had fought beside, 21 of Dutch's men dead or dying, others scattered across the territory and unlikely to return. The victory was real but costly, paid for in blood and lives that could not be replaced. Mangas was wounded but alive. Tahatan had survived with injuries that would heal. Chaska had somehow come through combat unscathed despite his age. But the faces of those who would never be seen again hung heavy over the valley, reminders that winning was not the same as escaping unscathed. The healer finished her work, securing bandages that were already showing red, and spoke to Kinta in Apache with tone that carried both hope and warning. Kinta translated for Cole, her voice shaking. She says the wound is bad but not fatal if infection does not set in. She has packed it with strong medicine, stopped the bleeding inside. Now it is up to Dakota's strength and will to fight. The healer looked at Cole, directly speaking in heavily accented English. You stay with her. Talk to her. Keep her wanting to live. Sometimes will matters more than medicine. Then she was gone, moving to the next wounded person, the next crisis, the endless work of triage and treatment. Cole settled beside Coda, his own wounds forgotten in the need to be present for her to be the anchor she might need to stay conscious in fighting. You heard her. You have to stay awake, have to keep fighting. Cannot let some bullet be what stops you after everything else failed. Coda's eyes opened, focusing on him with effort. I am very tired. Battle takes much from me. I know, but you are strongest person I know. You destroyed slave pens, freed your sister, led warriors against impossible odds. You can survive one bullet. Her smile was weak but present. You have much faith in me. This is good quality in husband. She squeezed his hand with grip that was too weak to be comfortable. Cole, if us do not survive, I want you to know that this week has been best week of my life. Not because of the fighting or the winning, but because of you, because you stayed when you could have run, because you chose to be partner instead of just husband by obligation. You are not dying. Cole spoke with certainty. He did not feel desperation, making the words more command than reassurance. You are going to survive this, and we are going to have that talk about what our marriage means. We are going to figure out what comes next now that Dutch is dead, and we do not have to fight for survival every moment. Coda's expression softened. I would like that. I would like many things with you if we get chance to have them. She closed her eyes, not unconsciousness, but exhaustion, demanding rest. Cole stayed beside her as darkness fell, as the camp settled into wary quiet, as warriors maintained watch against the possibility that Dutch's scattered men might regroup and return. But the attack did not come. The night passed with relative peace, broken only by the sounds of the wounded and the grieving. When dawn arrived, it found Cole still at Coda's side, still holding her hand, still refusing to leave, even when others suggested he needed treatment for his own injuries. She woke as the sun cleared the horizon, her eyes opening with awareness that suggested the fever had not taken hold during the night. She looked at Cole, saw that he had not moved, and something shifted in her expression. You stayed with me all night. Of course, where else would I be? Getting your own wounds treated, sleeping, doing anything except sitting here waiting to see if I die. Coda's voice was stronger than it had been last night, suggesting the healer's medicine was working. You are fool Cole Brennan, but you are my fool, and I am glad you stayed. The days that followed were marked by recovery and rebuilding, the tribe processing its victory and mourning its losses in equal measure. Mangas recovered from his wounds with the resilience of someone who had survived worse. Tahatan was hailed as hero for his defense of the women and children, though he deflected credit to the warriors who had fought beside him. Chaska returned to smoking his pipe and offering unsolicited wisdom, apparently untroubled by having participated in combat at his age. And Coda healed slowly, her wound closing properly. Infection kept at bay through the healer's skill and Coda's own determination to survive. Cole stayed out close during her recovery, their conversations deepening as the urgency of combat gave way to the quieter work of understanding each other. They talked about Ethan, about the guilt Cole had carried and was learning to release. They talked about Kinta, about the joy and complexity of having her sister back after 6 months of believing her lost. They talked about what kind of life they wanted to build now that the immediate threat was gone, about whether they would stay with the tribe or find their own path, about children and futures, and all the things that people discussed when survival was no longer the only question that mattered. 2 weeks after the battle, Mangas called a council to discuss what came next. The tribe had survived, but was diminished, weakened in ways that would take time to recover from. Dutch's operation was destroyed, his men scattered or dead, but other threats existed in the territories, other dangers that would need to be faced. We must rebuild, strengthen our defenses, recruit warriors from other tribes, establish alliances that protect us from those who would take advantage of our current weakness. Mangas spoke with the authority of someone who had led through worse crises and brought his people through. But we must also acknowledge what has been accomplished. We faced threat that could have destroyed us, and we survived. We owe this survival to many people, but especially to two. The chief looked at Koda and Cole. My daughter led warriors with courage and tactical skill that would make any father proud. And her husband, who was outsider 1 week ago, fought beside us with bravery that proves he is Apache in all ways that matter. Mongus paused, his expression softening fractionally. I demanded you marry my daughter because I thought it would protect her, thought outsider would provide alliance that kept her safe. I was wrong about this. You do not protect her. You fight beside her as equals, and this is better thing than protection. He gestured for them to stand to face the assembled tribe. Cole Brennan is no longer outsider who married into tribe. He is Apache warrior who has earned his place through blood and choice. No one will question this again. The pronouncement was met with voices raised in agreement, acceptance, that had been building through the week's events, finally crystallizing into something formal and binding. Cole felt the weight of it, the significance of being truly accepted rather than tolerated, of belonging through action rather than ceremony. When the council ended and people dispersed to their own activities, Cole and Koda found themselves alone for the first time since the battle. They walked to the edge of the camp, where they could see the valley spreading out below them, the landscape that had witnessed so much violence now peaceful in afternoon light. We did it, survived, won, proved that sometimes desperate people can overcome impossible odds. Koda's voice carried satisfaction and weariness mixed together. What happens now? Dutch is dead, his operation is destroyed. Do we just return to normal life as if nothing happened? Cole thought about that question, about what normal meant for people who had been through what they had experienced. I do not think we can go back to how things were. Too much has changed. But maybe that is a good thing. Maybe we get to decide what comes next instead of just reacting to threats. He looked at her, at the woman who had become his partner, through circumstances neither had chosen but both had embraced. I think I want to stay with the tribe, help rebuild, learn more Apache, figure out what it means to be married to a warrior who is better at fighting than I am. Koda's smile was genuine, carrying warmth that went beyond gratitude. I want these things too, but I also want something else. What? I want us to be more than just partners in combat. I want us to be partners in all things. I want to know you in ways that go beyond tactics and survival. I want to build life with you, not just survive alongside you. The admission carried vulnerability that Koda rarely showed, her walls coming down in ways that invited reciprocation. I want that too. I spent 3 years running from connection because I was afraid of failing again, afraid of caring about someone and losing them. But you have shown me that connection is worth the risk, that building something with someone matters more than protecting yourself from potential loss. Cole reached for her hand, the gesture familiar, now comfortable. I do not know what kind of husband I will be. I am still learning what it means to be Apache, still figuring out how to be partner to someone as strong as you are. But I want to try. I want to build something here with you, with the tribe. I want to choose staying over, running every single day for as long as we have. Koda's eyes shone with emotion, carefully controlled tears that she did not let fall, but did not hide either. Then we stay, we build, we see what comes next together. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, the intimacy of the gesture speaking to trust that had been earned through shared danger and mutual respect. I am glad you stayed, Cole. I am glad the universe or fate or chance brought you to that trap where you found me. I am glad you chose differently than the man Dutch expected you to be. Cole wrapped his arm around her, careful of her healing wound, feeling contentment that was new and fragile, but absolutely real. I am glad too. Glad I stayed. Glad I found you. Glad I finally stopped running from the person I could be and started becoming him instead. They stood together as the sun descended toward the horizon, two people who had found each other through impossible circumstances, who had been forced together by tribal law and had chosen to make that forced connection into something genuine. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges neither could predict, but for the first time in 3 years, Cole felt ready to face whatever came next, because he was no longer facing it alone. 6 months later, a rider approached the Apache village, carrying news from redemption. Marshal Collins had received report that Dutch Van Bergen's slave trading operation had been permanently dismantled, that the man himself was dead, that the territories were safer for the absence of his influence. But Collins had questions about who was responsible, about rumors that spoke of Apache warriors working with white gunfighter to accomplish what territorial law had failed to achieve. He wanted to know if the rumors were true, wanted to thank whoever had taken such extreme action against the operation he had been paid to ignore. Cole and Coda rode to redemption together, their arrival causing stir among townspeople who recognized the Apache woman and the white man who traveled with her as equals. Collins received them in his office, his weathered face carrying something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "So the rumors are true. You two led the assault that killed Dutch and freed his captives." Collins leaned back in his chair, studying them with uncomfortable directness. "I should probably arrest you for vigilante justice. Taking law into your own hands is technically illegal, even when the man you killed deserved killing." Coda's voice was flat, empty of emotion. "Will you arrest us?" Collins was quiet for a long moment, calculation visible behind his eyes. Then he shook his head slowly. "No, Dutch Van Bergen was cancer in these territories, protected by men like me, who looked the other way because fighting him seemed too costly. You did what needed doing when those of us with badges were too afraid or corrupt to do it ourselves." He stood, extending his hand. "Thank you. From someone who should have done his job but did not thank you for doing it anyway." Cole shook the offered hand, recognizing the significance of the gesture, the acknowledgement that sometimes justice happened outside official channels because official channels had been compromised or broken. They left redemption that afternoon, riding back toward the Apache village that had become home in ways Cole's childhood ranch never had. The territory stretched out around them, vast and dangerous and filled with possibility land where people could reinvent themselves if they had courage and determination. As they rode, Coda spoke about plans for the future, about training new warriors, about establishing trading relationships with friendly settlements, about the child she thought she might be carrying, though it was too early to be certain. Cole listened, contributing his own ideas, feeling the partnership deepen with each shared vision of what they could build together. They had started as strangers, forced into marriage by tribal law and desperate circumstances. They had become partners through combat and shared danger and mutual respect. And now finally they were becoming something more, two people who had chosen each other not because they had to, but because they wanted to, because the connection they had forged was worth nurturing and protecting and growing into whatever it might become. Cole thought about Ethan sometimes, about the guilt he had carried for 3 years and was finally learning to release. He thought about Sarah and the principles she had taught him about breaking cycles and choosing differently. He thought about Rebecca and the life in Silverton that had burned away and left space for something new to grow. But mostly he thought about the present, about Coda riding beside him, about the tribe that had accepted him, about the future they were building together. The past could not be changed, but the living could choose what to carry forward. Cole had chosen to carry partnership over isolation, action over paralysis, hope over guilt. It was enough. It had to be. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, enough felt like exactly the right amount. The desert stretched endless in every direction, indifferent to the man who crossed it and the choices that had brought him here. But Cole was no longer running from those choices. He was living with them, learning from them, becoming the kind of man who stood and fought and built, rather than fled and hid and survived. He was Apache now by choice and blood, and the bonds forged through shared struggle. He was husband to a warrior who was his equal in all things that mattered. He was part of something larger than himself, connected to people and place and purpose, in ways that made isolation feel like distant memory rather than constant temptation. The chains had fallen from Coda's wrists months ago. The chains of guilt and regret had fallen from Cole's heart shortly after. What remained was freedom hard-won and dearly bought, the kind that came not from avoiding responsibility, but from embracing it fully. They rode toward home together, two people who had found in each other's brokenness the strength to become whole, who had discovered that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose rather than the ones we are born into, who had learned that home is not a place but the people who stand beside you when everything else falls apart. And that was more than enough. It was everything.